Hey viewers! Hope you're all doing great. Before I start the story, tell me in the comments which country you're watching from and what time it is there. And if you enjoy my videos, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. If you listen closely, very closely, you might still hear it. That gentle, uneven rhythm beneath the wind. The slow groaning of ancient wood. And something else beneath it. Not the river. Not the mill wheel. Something older. Something that medieval villagers near the River Somme spoke of only in whispers, especially when dusk settled over the water. They said the river sometimes watched back. And tonight, in this story, you and I are walking toward that same mill. The year is somewhere in the early 13th century. The sky is a low, pale gray, the kind that presses softly on the land, muting voices, cooling breath. The River Somme moves with its usual sleepy determination, its surface broken only by drifting reeds and the gentle swirl of autumn leaves. Nothing about it seems dangerous at first glance. Nothing seems awake. But the millers of this age believed water was never truly asleep. The path toward the mill is rutted and damp beneath our feet, stamped by countless wooden cartwheels carrying sacks of grain from villages nearby. These carts belonged to people who lived by the rhythm of that mill. The same rhythm you'll hear now in your imagination. Clack, creak, splash, the wooden paddles dipping, rising, dipping again, carried endlessly by the current. Circular life. Slow life. Patient life. As we reach the mill, the air smells of damp timber, grain, and river mist. Medieval mills were not grand buildings, just sturdy structures of stone at the base and timber above, patched and repatched through years of river floods, storms, and frost. You can picture it. Moss tucked into the cracks, the thatched roof slightly sagging, and the wooden wheel turning with the weight of centuries. The miller of this place. Let us imagine him only through what is historically known, not by inventing his personality. Would have been a practical man. In medieval villages, the miller often occupied an important position. Part engineer, part laborer, part keeper of a crucial community resource. Every villager relied on him for flour, and thus for bread. Without him, hunger crept quietly into homes. But the miller's work was not silent, nor peaceful. The mill groaned all day and much of the night. The grinding stones ate through grain with a constant scraping sound, like stone breathing against stone. The wooden gears shifted with long sighs. And always, always the water hummed. Medieval people believed rivers were living forces, not metaphors, living. They respected them the way they respected weather, sickness, or church bells. Some thought each river had a spirit that governed its moods. Whether it flooded, whether fish were plentiful, whether it swallowed the occasional unlucky traveler. The River Somme, slow as it was, earned a reputation for unpredictability in wet seasons. So when the millers whispered of something watching from the water, they likely didn't imagine monsters or fantastical beings. Those belonged to stories of another kind. Instead, they imagined presence, awareness, the way water could shift from gentle to forceful without warning, the way it could take without returning. In the early hours of morning before sunrise, the mill was often the first place awake in the entire village. You can imagine the scene. Mist curling around the wheel, soft lapping at the edges of the embankment, the wet timbers gleaming faintly. Somewhere inside, the miller would be checking the wheel's axle, brushing away silt and weeds tangled in its paddles, making sure the gears were not jammed by wet grain. There were no lanterns at this hour, not usually. Oil was expensive, so he would work mostly by touch, running his fingers along wet ropes, the wooden trough that channeled water toward the wheel, the rough stones that ground the grain. Everything was done by feel, by familiarity, and by routine. And yet, even men accustomed to this world spoke occasionally of moments when the river seemed aware. A sudden swirl right beside them, a ripple that looked like a shadow, a shifting in the deep water that came with no wind. Medieval minds did not leap toward fantasy. They leapt toward meaning. Something is wrong, they would mutter. Something moves. In the evenings, villagers came with sacks on their backs or balanced across shoulders. Their feet padded over the damp earth. Horses snorted clouds of soft steam into the cool air. The conversations were quiet. Conversations in medieval life always were. People saved their voices for necessity. No one shouted unless danger demanded it. So the soundscape near the mill was made of small noises. The soft thud of grain bags, the scrape of leather shoe soles, the muffled greetings exchanged. All the while, the wheel turned steadily, like a giant breathing in its sleep. Imagine yourself inside the mill now. The air is thick with dust. Flour hangs in the light like pale fog. When the millstones grind, the floor trembles ever so slightly, as though the building has a heartbeat. The smell is warm and earthy. Grain, stone, sweat, and wood. People waited patiently for their turn. Bread was essential. No matter how tired the miller became, the work could not stop. It was one of the rare places in a medieval settlement that did not follow the sun's path. If there was grain to grind, the wheel kept turning. The river kept pushing. The miller kept working. But sometimes, very rarely, villagers spoke of the wheel stopping abruptly. Not jamming, not breaking, just stopping. As if the river had paused. As if it had turned its attention upward, toward the mill, toward the people, toward something unseen. And those few moments are the ones that birthed whispered stories. Stories that lingered around hearth fires. Stories that made children tug blankets closer. They did not talk of demons or magical creatures. They simply spoke of the river watching, and how the water, so calm, so slow, sometimes held its breath. Tonight, as we stand by the mill in our imagination, you may hear the same thing. The wheel turning, the paddles dipping, the gears shifting, the stones grinding, and beneath it all, a quiet pause, almost too soft to notice, like something in the river is listening. This is where our long journey begins. 20 batches through a single place, a single piece of medieval life, a single rhythm of work and water. No fantasy. Only the quiet truths, the daily routines, the subtle fears, and the steady patience of the people who lived along the River Somme. The wheel turns, the river watches, and the story moves with them. The river moves at its slow, measured pace, as if it has carried centuries on its back and learned never to hurry. And as we continue our quiet walk along the banks of the Somme, morning settles gently over the water. There is no rush in a medieval morning. Life begins the way embers brighten, softly, gradually, with a sense of rhythm older than memory. Farmers from nearby hamlets step onto the path, their wooden clogs damp from dew. Their breaths rise like faint smoke in the cool air. They do not speak loudly. Medieval life was full of labor, but also aware of silence, aware that sound traveled strangely near water, echoing more than one expected. So their voices remain low, respectful of the dawn, respectful of the mill, respectful of the river whose power provided their bread. The mill stands steady before them, its wheel half-shadowed by reeds. You can almost feel the age in its beams, timber darkened by countless seasons, warped slightly from wet winters, patched again and again by hands that understood with the way shepherds understood wool. Every medieval structure carried the fingerprints of many people. Nothing was factory-made. Nothing was perfect. Everything bore human touch. As villagers approach, the wheel's motion becomes clearer. The gentle splash, the faint thump each time a paddle rises and empties itself. Inside, the grinding stones are already turning. The miller has begun his day before the village stirred, because grain waits for no one. If harvest has been good, his work is relentless. If harvest has been poor, his work is cautious, careful, measured, as each sack represents a family's fragile hope. Step inside again. The floor is scattered with husks. The scent of crushed barley, wheat, or rye lingers in the heavy air. You can hear the flutter of a sparrow that nests in the rafters. Medieval mills attracted birds. They came for stray seeds, for warmth, for the comfort of wooden beams untouched by storms. Their soft chirping mixes with the grinding rhythm as though part of the mill's heartbeat. The miller, sleeves rolled halfway to his elbows, lifts a wooden scoop to check the grain's flow. Flour dust settles on his skin, turning it pale. Medieval millers often appeared ghostly for this reason. Not supernatural, simply covered in the fine powder that rose like smoke from the rotating stones. They lived half in the world of the village and half in the world of machinery and water. People trusted them, yet sometimes regarded them with quiet distance, as though the river's spirit had lent them a sliver of its mystery. You may imagine him now, though without giving him a fictional personality. Only what history tells us. His movements are economical. He works by habit, not flourish. When he adjusts the hopper, he does so with a strength built from repetition, not training. His hands are roughened by rope and grain, muscles tuned to the weight of wood, stone and sacks. Outside, 2 villagers wait with their sacks. One sits on a stump, rubbing his palms together to warm them. Another adjusts the cloth around her head. They speak in a tone so low it almost blends into the river's murmur. Their talk is simple. The yield of fields, the coming frost, the distance of markets. Every word belongs to real medieval life. No fantasy, no tales. Just the practical concerns that form the backbone of survival. While they speak, the river shifts again. A ripple travels upstream, not downstream. An unusual direction, almost like a breath taken backward. The villagers don't notice at first. They are accustomed to small oddities. Medieval minds didn't rush to explain everything. They simply accepted nature's moods as part of existence. But the miller does notice. Pauses. His hand rests on the wooden beam. He listens without turning. For a moment, the river grows strangely quiet, as if it is holding its voice in its throat. Then, after a few heartbeats, the water resumes its steady push. The wheel continues turning. Life continues turning. And the villagers remain unaware of the subtle shift. But the miller's shoulders stay tense for a few breaths longer. He has seen too many seasons to ignore such stillness. Step outside again now. Walk around to the far side of the mill, where moss clings thickly to the stones and the river's movement is more visible. Weeds sway. Leaves skim the surface, drifting lazily toward the wheel. A frog rests near the bank, half hidden, watching with calm, unblinking eyes. Water insects scatter under the faint vibration of the mill's paddles. Everything appears ordinary, yet you feel a faint sense, as soft as a forgotten memory, that the river observes its surroundings as much as it carries them. A small boat approaches along the current, not rowed but guided by a long pole. It belongs to a local fisherman. His face is lined with weather and fatigue. His movements are slow, deliberate. Medieval fishermen woke early and returned late, their entire day shaped by water's temperament. He glances at the mill, nods toward the villagers, then continues downstream, his boat making a faint shushu against the ripples. All the while, the mill's rhythm persists. It is the anchor of village life. It is the place where every person, no matter their age or status, eventually arrives with a sack of grain. It is the pulse of bread, the pulse of community. As the sun lifts a little higher, shadows crawl across the mill's facade. Birds begin their mid-morning flurry, wings brushing against the air in soft bursts. A cart creaks onto the path, pulled by a short, thick horse with shaggy hair around its hooves. The driver flicks the reins lightly, not harshly, for medieval farm horses were valuable and treated with more patience than livestock bound for market. The cart stops beside the mill. The driver climbs down, dusts his tunic, and begins unloading sacks. Each thud as the sack hits the ground blends with the wheels turning. The miller steps out to greet him with a nod. No wasted words. Words were tools, not decorations in this time. The river glints under the slowly strengthening light. And as the villagers settle into quiet waiting, the miller steps near the edge, kneels, and washes flour-dusted hands in the cold current. For a moment, the water flows calmly around his fingers. Then, just for the briefest heartbeat, it seems to swirl tighter around his skin, as though acknowledging him. He withdraws his hand quickly, water dripping from fingertips. No one sees this except you. No one hears the faint shift in current except you. Not because it is magical, but because medieval people did not stand still long enough to notice the small hesitations of nature. They moved with purpose, their minds busied with needs. But you You are watching quietly, listening softly, noticing the pauses others overlook. The mill wheel resumes its steady groan. The villagers resume their murmured talk. And the river continues to watch. The morning deepens with the kind of slow certainty that medieval days carried. Life in these centuries did not rush forward. It unfolded the way the river moved. Steady, patient, shaped by work and weather more than desire. And so the mill by the River Somme settles fully into its rhythm as more villagers arrive, their footsteps creating soft impressions in the damp soil. The air inside the mill warms slightly as the grindstones continue their turning. Each rotation creates a faint tremor beneath the wooden floorboards, a vibration that becomes almost comforting if one stands still long enough. In this age, people were accustomed to such sounds. Creaks, groans, shifting wood. They were companions to daily life, not disruptions. Even the constant drone of the mill was accepted as part of the land's voice. A young boy enters quietly, carrying a small sack hardly large enough to feed a household. His clothes are patched, his hair unevenly cut, his steps cautious. In medieval villages, children often ran errands early, helping their families lighten the day's workload. He stands near the doorway, unsure whether to approach. His fingers clutch the rough cloth of the sack, twisting it nervously. The miller glances up, gives a brief nod, and gestures him forward. The boy steps closer, setting the small bundle on the wooden table beside the hopper. Flour dust rises faintly around him, settling on his eyelashes like pale snow. He blinks but says nothing. Children in this era were not expected to speak unless spoken to. Silence was respect. Outside the mill, the river continues to push the wheel with its slow persistence. The paddles dip into the water, emerge glistening, and dip again. Sometimes a trail of bubbles forms behind them. Sometimes a small stick or leaf gets caught momentarily before slipping away. Everything follows the rhythm of the water. The boy, now waiting near the wall, glances toward the open doorway. His eyes catch the movement of the river. There is something mesmerizing about it, even to one who has seen it every day of his life. The surface shifts gently, like fabric stirred by a faint breath. Sunlight glints off its ripples in thin, wavering lines. But then, just for a moment, he frowns. The water near the wheel seems to bend in an unusual direction, again upstream, again slightly unnatural. The boy tilts his head, watching more closely. He is young enough not to fear small oddities, but old enough to recognize when something is not behaving as it usually does. Before he can stare too long, the miller calls him forward to collect his flour. The boy quickly obeys, stepping away from the river's view, unaware that the water resumes its usual course the moment he turns away. As he receives the small parcel, newly tied with rough cord, he nods his thanks and retreats. Medieval courtesies were brief but sincere. His footsteps fade outside the mill. Soon, the sound of them blends into the distant murmur of other villagers approaching from farther hamlets. Standing once more outside, we watch as a woman arrives with 2 sacks balanced expertly across her shoulders. Her steps are slow but determined. Medieval life conditioned people to endurance rather than speed. The path beneath her feet squishes faintly with mud. She adjusts her grip on the pole supporting the sacks and pauses briefly to rest. The river flows beside her, reflecting her figure in softened outline. Shadows tremble on the surface, distorted by the water's quiet motion. For a moment, she gazes down at her reflection, a habit many people had, though they rarely spoke of it. Water was a mirror that never held its shape. It showed truth for an instant and then dissolved it again. Inside, the mill continues its work. Grain pours steadily through the wooden funnel, grinding between the heavy stones. The miller listens for any sign of strain. A millstone could crack if misaligned, and such an accident would be disastrous, not only costly but dangerous. So he tilts his head, listening to the deep groaning timbre that has become familiar to him. Each sound means something. A healthy rotation, a slipping belt, a misfed grain, a swelling of wood from moisture. He hears them all. Mid-morning settles deeper. The sun brightens the riverbank, revealing more details. The small clusters of reeds, the patterned movement of insects on the water's surface, the faint scatter of pebbles beneath the current. The mill's shadow stretches longer across the soil, touching the first few steps of the path where villagers queue. A breeze moves gently through the reeds, carrying the scent of wet earth and crushed grain. Medieval people were deeply attuned to such smells. They relied on them. Smell of rain before it arrived, smell of mold and stored grain, smell of damp wood that warned of rot. Life was lived close to nature, close to the land. And yet, in that breeze you feel something else. Something that isn't quite wind. A brief tightening of the air. Faint shift in pressure. The reeds nearest the water bend slightly, not in the wind's direction, but toward the river itself, as though drawn gently inward, as though responding to a pull too subtle to see. If anyone else notices, they do not show it. The villagers remain absorbed in their quiet conversations. The miller returns to adjusting the chute. A horse pulls at its reins, snorting at the dust. Life continues its steady pattern untouched. But the river seems to have moments when it breathes differently. Follow its current now with your eyes. It moves slowly but with purpose. It carries leaves, twigs, lost feathers, and once in a while, a pale flower that has drifted from a nearby field. Each object floats past the wheel, disappearing behind the mill's wooden frame, and re-emerging downstream. Then, after a while, something curious happens. A cluster of leaves floats toward the wheel, moving at the same pace as the current. But when they reach the paddles, instead of slipping around them, they spin once, twice, 3 times in place. A tiny whirling motion that has no reason to exist. No stone beneath them. No hidden eddy. No obstruction. Just a brief, impossible swirl. The miller steps outside at that moment. His gaze falls naturally toward the wheel. It is a habit more than concern. But when he sees the leaves spinning, he pauses. His brow furrows. His hand tightens slightly on the wooden railing. He watches for a moment longer. Then the leaves suddenly release, sliding smoothly downstream, as though the strange swirl had never been. He says nothing. He simply turns, wipes his hands on his apron, and returns inside. But as he steps through the doorway, he glances once over his shoulder at the water, not with fear, not with confusion, but with the quiet wariness of a man who knows the river has moods he cannot command. The villagers remain unaware. Their sacks of grain sit patiently at their feet. Their horses wait. Their thoughts revolve around bread, fields, weather, and winter. But the river watches from beneath its own shifting surface. And if you stand here long enough, quiet enough, you can almost feel it watching you too. The day settles into its quiet middle, the hour when the river seems to breathe a little deeper, and the mill's rhythm becomes more constant, more certain. In medieval life, midday was never loud. There were no clocks striking, no bustling markets near this mill, no metal wheels or distant engines. Only the soft murmur of life at its simplest. The villagers waiting with their sacks shift their weight occasionally, but no one grows impatient. This kind of waiting is woven into their daily existence. Grain takes the time it takes. The wheel turns at the pace the river allows. The stones grind according to the load they bear. Everything follows nature's timing, not human desire. A man in a thick wool cloak approaches the mill path now. His boots are muddy, his shoulders wide. His steps slow from the weight of the 2 sacks he carries. His cloak is frayed at the edges, the way most common garments were after many seasons. He pauses near the bank, lowering his load with careful precision so as not to spill grain. Then he straightens slowly, pressing a hand against his back. In medieval times, people's bodies carried the stories of their work. Bent shoulders, calloused hands, stiff joints, quiet reminders of years of lifting, planting, and harvesting. He looks at the river briefly, as though gauging its mood. Many villagers did this without realizing they were doing it. The river was part of their world like weather, something felt instinctively. Today the water glides calmly, giving no sign of the small disturbances witnessed earlier. Its surface is smooth except for the places where reeds lean over, brushing the flow. Inside the mill, the grindstones continue their low, circular sigh. Dust floats slowly in the warm air, catching the faint beams of sunlight that enter through small cracks in the wooden walls. Medieval buildings always carried such imperfections, thin slivers of brightness in one moment, cold drafts in another, yet people adapted easily. They were not troubled by such things. Near the mill's rear wall, a few tools hang, wooden mallets, wedges, and long iron hooks used to adjust the stones. Their edges are worn smooth from use. The miller moves past them, lifting a broom to brush away accumulating husks near the turning gears. Every movement he makes is practical. Small chores done out of habit, not urgency. Outside again, the river's steady push remains soothing. The sound of water slipping around the paddles blends with the creak of the wheel, a kind of lullaby shaped not by intention, but by the ancient meeting of wood and current. If you listen long enough, you can almost separate each sound. Paddle entering water, paddle lifting, wooden axle turning, small droplets falling back into the river. The villagers occasionally speak, though always softly. Their voices drift like distant threads, weaving into the mill's atmosphere. A woman adjusts the scarf around her head and sits on a stone near the riverbank. She dips her fingers into the cool water for a moment, wiping away a smudge of flour from earlier work. As she lifts her hand, droplets fall back into the river in tiny circles. But then she pauses. Her eyes narrow slightly. The circles formed by the falling droplets. They do not drift outward evenly. For a moment, just a breath, they pull inward, collapsing toward a small center instead of expanding. Like a ripple reversing direction. It lasts only a heartbeat. Then the water returns to its usual pattern, expanding gently, indistinguishable from any other ripple. The woman tilts her head, unsure of what she saw. But medieval life did not encourage lingering on strange moments. There was always work, always tasks waiting. So she wipes her hand on her apron and looks away, letting the moment slip from her thoughts as simply as the river carries away a leaf. A pair of ducks glide past, creating small soft waves that brush against the mill's foundation stones. Their feathers shine faintly in the midday light. One dips its head beneath the water, emerging with a glistening bead that rolls down its beak. Creatures along the river behave as they always have, calm, unhurried, indifferent to human worries. But beneath them, the water swirls. Not enough to disturb the ducks, not enough to draw attention, but enough to pulse with a subtle intention. A pattern that repeats and fades, like the river testing its own boundaries. Meanwhile, the miller steps outside to tighten the rope tied around the support beam near the wheel. He tugs once, twice, checking for any slack. His hands are steady, practiced. But as he leans slightly over the railing, peering at the wheel's base, he pauses. There is a faint murmur, lower than the water's usual sound, almost like a voice carried from far beneath the surface. It is not speech. It is not music. It is simply a tone, a resonance, vibrating from the deep current into the wooden frame. The miller's brow tightens. He listens. The murmur continues for a moment longer, then dissolves into the ordinary rush of water. He stands still, waiting, testing whether the sound will return. Does not. The river flows normally. The wheel turns normally. The sunlight touches the water in normal, wavering strokes. So he exhales slowly, wipes his hands again, and returns inside. But even as he goes, he glances down once more. Not with fear, but with an old instinct shared by all who work near unpredictable forces. Respect, caution, awareness. By now the queue of villagers has grown longer. A donkey pulls a small cart forward, its hooves clicking softly on the packed earth. Children cling to its sides, balancing themselves as they ride, their laughter hushed to avoid disturbing the older workers. They hop down near the mill and follow their mother, helping her carry a sack half their weight. The mill's interior grows busier, the scrape of wooden scoops mixing with the grind of stones. People step aside for one another in silent cooperation. This was community in the Middle Ages. Not loud, not extravagant, but a quiet sharing of space and purpose. Outside, the river continues its gentle, unbroken flow. A breeze stirs again, sending ripples across the surface. Everything looks peaceful. Everything looks familiar. And yet, once more, that subtle pressure fills the air. You feel it before you notice it. Faint tightening. Pause in the rhythm. The water, for a heartbeat, seems thicker, heavier, as though something deep below has shifted its weight. A single paddle on the wheel lifts more slowly, dragging against the water. Just one. The others move normally. Only one hesitates. Then the rhythm returns to normal. No one sees this. No one hears. No one stops. But you notice. And the river knows you notice. In the stillness of early afternoon, as the sun warms the stones and the villagers settle deeper into their routines, the River Somme seems to blink. An invisible gesture beneath the surface, a momentary acknowledgement. Watches, remembers, and it waits. The afternoon deepens with the slow steadiness that medieval days seem carved from. There is a softness in the light now. Noon glare has passed, leaving behind a warmth that feels calmer, gentler, as if the world exhales. Along the banks of the River Somme, the reeds sway lightly, their tips brushing the air like fingers tracing an old memory. The villagers waiting outside the mill shift again, though not impatiently. This is the hour when hunger begins to stir, but they are accustomed to it. Most have eaten nothing more than coarse bread at dawn, maybe a little broth if they were fortunate. Medieval stomachs knew the day's rhythm well. Hunger was simply another part of routine. One of the men kneels near the riverbank, dipping a wooden cup into the water. He drinks slowly, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. Water from the Somme is cool, slightly silted, carrying the faint taste of riverbed. No one questions its safety. It is what they have, what they've always had. But as the man lowers his cup again to rinse it, he pauses. The reflection in the water ripples oddly, not pushed by wind, not disturbed by movement. For a heartbeat, his reflection appears stretched, drawn narrowly downward as though pulled by an unseen force beneath the surface. He squints, shifts his position, leans closer. The reflection returns to normal. Just water again. Just river again. He shrugs and stands, dusting mud from his knees. Life demands too much from him to waste thought on something so fleeting. Inside the mill, the grindstones continue their patient work. A fine mist of flour creates a pale haze that drifts through the beams of sunlight slanting in through cracks. Dust settles on every surface. The miller's eyebrows, the wooden rails, the sacks leaning against walls. There is a constant faint sweetness in the air, the scent of crushed grain mixing with the musk of damp wood. A second mill worker, often a young assistant or relative, moves rhythmically between tasks, adjusting the hopper, tying sacks, sweeping the floor. Most medieval mills required more than one pair of hands, especially during harvest seasons. His movements are brisk but quiet. Even when he coughs from inhaling dust, it is a soft, muffled sound. Overhead, pigeons flutter in the rafters, their claws scratching lightly on timber. They coo in low, throaty notes, completely unbothered by the grinding stones beneath them. Birds often took shelter inside mills. The warm, dusty air provided protection from harsher weather. Then the assistant pauses. A faint shiver runs through the wooden boards under his feet. It is so small he barely notices. Just the slightest tremble, as though someone walked on the roof, or a distant cart passed along the path. But the tremor repeats. Measured, almost like a heartbeat felt through the floor. He frowns, places a hand on one of the vertical beams, and stays still to feel more clearly. The wood is warm from sunlight, rough beneath his fingers. First he feels nothing. Then, just as he begins to think he imagined it, the tremor pulses again, so slight it might be mistaken for a shift in the wheel's rotation. But the wheel outside is steady, its rhythm unchanged. He steps outside to check. The river glides past, calm, untroubled. The paddles dip and rise in their endless circle. Nothing seems unusual. Children nearby toss small pebbles into the water, giggling quietly as the stones vanish with tiny splashes. Still he stares longer than usual. Something deep in him, something instinctual, waits for the slight tremor again. Does not return. He breathes out slowly and returns inside. But his eyes continue drifting toward the river every few moments. Afternoon shadows lengthen. The light slants across the mill's outer walls, bringing out the grain of old timber, illuminating places where carpenters long gone once hammered in nails by hand. The smell of warm wood rises in the air. A new villager arrives, pulling a handcart filled with freshly harvested rye. His boots sink slightly into the soft mud near the path. He wipes sweat from his forehead. Though the air is cool, the work of moving sacks is heavy. He nods at those waiting, finds his place in the loose line, and leans against the cart handle to rest. To pass the time, he looks out at the river. People often did. The water gave them something to focus on while their minds wandered. He watches reeds sway. He watches the wheel turn. He watches the water's glossy surface. Then something catches his attention. At the bend just beyond the mill, the river seems to deepen in color. Not darker but denser, almost velvety. The usual glints of light fade for a moment. A smooth heaviness moves beneath the surface, like a shadow with no shape. It travels silently, almost gracefully, slipping around the bend. He leans forward slightly, trying to understand what he's seeing. But just as it reaches the area beneath the mill wheel, the heaviness disperses. Light returns. Reflections shimmer again. Everything appears normal. He blinks. The shadow is gone. He rubs his eyes, shakes his head, and laughs quietly at himself. Long hours in the field can make anyone see strange things in moving water. And he has grain to grind. There is no time for river gazing. Beside him, an elderly woman stoops to tie her shoelaces, a strip of leather wrapping worn boots. Her hands tremble faintly from age. When she straightens up, she takes a slow breath and looks toward the river as well. Her eyes linger longer. The elderly always watched nature closely. They had seen patterns come and go, storms build from silence, winters hinted by a single cold gust. Her gaze travels along the surface of the Somme. Then she murmurs softly, almost inaudibly, "Aj paani kuch or lag raha hai." Today the water feels different. No one hears her. No one responds. She lowers herself to sit on a stone, folding her hands in her lap, without knowing why a strange restlessness has touched her. Inside, the miller stops his work for only a breath. He wipes flour from his arms and listens, not for sounds of danger, not for shifting stones, but for the river's voice. It's quieter than usual, almost thoughtful, almost waiting. He breathes deeply, then returns to his task. Grain pours, stones grind. The world continues. But the river's quiet. As wait. The hour grows later. The sun sinks lower. And the River Somme holds its secrets beneath a surface that looks, to everyone else, perfectly calm. Yet if you stand here, as still as the mill's old beams, you can feel it. Something beneath the water is awake. Something listening. Something learning. And something slowly rising. You can almost hear it now. The steady hush of the Somme as it glides past the mill's foundations. In the early hours, when the sky is still a dim slate blue and only a thin stripe of pale morning begins to rise in the east, the river sounds different. Denser, heavier, almost like it hasn't fully awakened. Millers in medieval Picardy often reached their work before sunrise. Not because they wished to, but because the rhythm of grain, harvest, and hunger allowed no delays. And so, long before the villagers even stirred under wool blankets, the mill by the Somme was already stretching into its day. Imagine the miller stepping onto the damp planks outside the mill door, the wood swollen from last night's mist. His boots make no sharp sound, just a gentle thud, softened by layers of humidity that never truly leave the riverbank. The faint clatter inside, where yesterday's stones cooled after a long day of grinding, tells him the building has settled overnight. Everything is slow, patient, as though the mill itself breathes with the river. Inside, the first task would be checking the gearings. Medieval mills relied on wooden cogwheels whose teeth had to be carefully fitted, replaced, and constantly observed. They swelled in wet seasons, shrank slightly in dry spells, and cracked in cold snaps. The miller's fingers, roughened from years of adjusting wedges and pegs, glide over them with a touch that is more instinct than thought. He knows each notch and irregularity the way one might know the contours of a childhood path. When he lifts the small lantern closer, the warm light shows how the interior is layered with fine dust. Flour, always flour, settling over beams, walls, sacks, and even his eyelashes if he works too late. Medieval visitors often described mills as hazy interiors where the air itself seemed to shimmer with suspended powder. And as he breathes, he inhales the faint sweetness of wheat and rye, a scent that clings to millers so deeply that villagers could identify them from several paces away. There is something slow and repetitive about this environment, something that naturally allows the mind to drift. Yet for the miller, concentration is everything. One misaligned tooth, one poorly balanced stone, one moment of inattentiveness could spell disaster. Mills were known to catch fire more easily than most buildings because flour dust, when dense enough, could ignite from the smallest spark. Medieval records mention such incidents often, reports of mills destroyed in the time it takes to knead dough. And so, even in this quiet hour, the miller works with cautious respect, moving gently, avoiding sudden knocks of metal on stone. Outside, the river continues its hushed conversation. The Somme, unlike the torrential rivers in mountainous regions, has always been a slow waterway. Its pace made it ideal for milling, fishing, ferrying small goods, and guiding trade. Even in the Middle Ages, people recognized the Somme's temperament. Chroniclers described it as calm as a patient ox, or mild as a monk in prayer. Its steady flow kept the mill wheel turning at a predictable rhythm, the kind millers loved because it meant fewer adjustments to their stone speed. As dawn inches up the sky, the birds begin their hesitant morning calls. Not all at once, just a single note here, another there, like scattered threads being pulled taut. The miller pauses and listens. Over time he has learned the signs. If the birds begin too early, rain or wind might be coming. If they remain silent too long, frost may be taking hold. These are the sorts of unspoken knowledge people gained not from written accounts, but from a lifetime spent outdoors, observing. By now, villagers begin appearing along the footpath leading to the mill. Some carry sacks of grain balanced on shoulders or strapped with rope across their backs. Others drag small handcarts with squeaking wheels. Grain was heavy, and families often rationed their trips, bringing enough for several days' worth of flour. They greet the miller with nods rather than chatter. The morning is chilly, and their breaths come out in short white clouds. The mill starts its work. The water wheel creaks as the miller adjusts the sluice gate, letting more of the Somme's steady current push its paddles. Slowly, the large wheel gains momentum. Its first rotations are sluggish, like a tired creature shaking itself awake. Then, as the water's pressure builds, the paddles dip deeper, lift, drop, and the circle becomes smooth, rhythmic, almost meditative. Inside, the grinding stones hum to life. These stones, often made from French burstone and painstakingly balanced, are heavy enough to crush grain into fine powder but must never touch each other directly. The miller listens, really listens, because the pitch of the sound tells him everything. Too high and the stones are too close. Too low, and they're grinding inefficiently. This attention to detail is why millers were both respected and occasionally mistrusted. People believed they possessed specialized knowledge, secrets of the river and stone that ordinary villagers could not fully understand. As the grinding continues, a faint vibration runs through the wooden floor. The structure, beams, wheels, shafts, and gears, works as one continuous organism. Even the river seems folded into it, as if the Somme's pulse enters the building, climbs through its bones, and emerges in the slow grinding sound of flour being born from grain. Villagers sit outside as they wait for their turn, sometimes on overturned sacks or simple wooden stools, sometimes simply leaning against the mill wall. They murmur to one another about harvest predictions, weather patterns, local disputes, and bits of news carried along trade routes. Medieval European life was a slow exchange of information, fragmented and often unreliable. But at the mill, where people naturally gathered, stories knitted themselves into communal memory. Occasionally, a miller's assistant steps out to empty chutes, sweep the walkway or fetch water. His clothes are dusted white. His hair looks lighter than it truly is, and his eyebrows hold faint traces of flour like winter frost. He doesn't speak much either. The work is relentless, and breath needs saving. Hour by hour, the day unfolds like this. Grinding, shifting sacks, adjusting water flow, measuring flour. The noise of the mill never becomes harsh. It stays deep, slow, repetitive, an earthly heartbeat shaped by the river's patience. Visitors often said that after sitting by the Somme mill long enough, their own breathing naturally fell into the same rhythm as the wheel. Even now, in imagination, you might feel your breath softening, lengthening, gently matching the wooden circle turning outside. But beneath this peace, something else lingers, something the villagers spoke of only quietly. They claimed that sometimes, when dusk settled or dawn had not fully risen, the river seemed to whisper differently. Faint shift in tone, a ripple when there was no breeze, a sound not of water but almost like watching. And although the miller would shake his head at such tales, he too, on certain mornings when he worked alone, felt the hairs on his arms rise for reasons he could not quite name. By the time morning fully settles, the mill feels like the quiet center of a world that moves at its own pace. The Somme's gentle current presses steadily into the paddles of the wheel, turning them with that same unchanging patience that generations before had known. If you were to stand beside it now, you would feel the faint spray of water drifting upward with each rotation, almost like a cool breath brushing your cheek. It is the kind of sensation that wakes you without disturbing your calm, the sort of natural touch that medieval workers understood as part of their daily rhythm. Inside the mill, the soft grumble of the grinding stones is deeper now. Morning grain from early arrivals has begun to move through the system, filling the interior with a steady vibration. The wooden beams absorb the tremors, sending them lightly through the walls and floor. It's a constant, familiar feeling, one that a miller barely notices, but that a visitor might take moments to adjust to. You might imagine sitting on a small stool in the corner, watching the dust drift and the sunlight fall in pale stripes through the narrow windows, letting that low, repetitive rumble settle into your chest as if it were syncing with your breathing. The miller wipes his hands on his apron, though the flour settled on the fabric barely shifts. His sleeves are dusted white up to the elbows, and even the lines of his palms look lighter than usual. He pauses for a moment to stretch his back, rolling his shoulders as he listens, not in a distracted way, but with the attentive stillness of someone who reads sound the way others read ink on parchment. Millers often relied more on hearing than sight. The pitch of the stones, the rhythm of the wheel, the creak of the main shaft, these noises told them everything long before visible problems emerged. At the far end of the mill, the assistant checks the flour collecting in the trough. He lets it fall through his fingers, feeling for texture. Medieval mills didn't produce perfectly uniform flour. Texture varied based on grain type, moisture, and the sharpness of the stones. Bakers in local villages adjusted their methods accordingly, kneading dough until it balanced the differences. Bread, after all, was the base of almost every meal. Morning, midday, and evening. Flour from the Somme mill fed dozens of families, and although people rarely spoke of it directly, they all understood the mill's importance. Outside, the path leading to the mill grows more lively. A cart arrives, pulled by a small, sturdy horse whose coat is still damp from morning dew. The man driving it greets others with a nod before easing the cart beside the entrance. He lifts a sack onto his shoulder, grunting under the weight. Grain was not light, especially when carried in the thick, tightly woven linen sacks common at the time. A few villagers glance over but continue with their conversations, unbothered by the sounds of labor. They are used to it, and in many ways comforted by it. A light breeze moves through the valley now, stirring the reeds at the riverbank. The Somme scent carries with it a mix of water, earth, and faint vegetation, the kind of smell that settles into clothing and hair during long days outdoors. Children who grew up near the river often recalled, even years later, how that smell was a part of their earliest memories. Soft, damp, and impossibly steady. Near the mill door, a pair of older women sit with baskets at their feet. They have come not to grind, but to collect bran, useful for animal feed, for thickening porridges, or for stretching flour in lean months. They talk quietly about spinning, about a neighbor's sick goat, about the slow recovery of a relative who had fallen ill during winter. Their voices mingle gently with the sound of the mill, creating that layered texture of noise so common in medieval workplaces. Nothing loud, nothing rushed, just the weaving together of human presence and mechanical labor. Inside, the miller adjusts the stone spindle with a wooden lever. This small movement raises the upper stone by barely a finger's width, but even such a small shift will change the grind's coarseness. He watches the dust fall for a moment, listening again as the pitch shifts from a heavy murmur to a more open tone. This is the balance millers perfected, keeping the stones from heating, preventing the grain from burning, maintaining a steady rhythm that wouldn't waste energy or stress the wheel. He steps outside afterward, rubbing his wrists as he looks over the water. The Somme glides past with its familiar smoothness. The surface reflects the pale sky in patches, broken occasionally by a swirl of fish beneath. Beyond the river, the land stretches in gentle slopes, dotted with small plots of farmland and a few grazing animals. Nothing is hurried here. Even the distant movement of a shepherd guiding his flock feels slow, measured, and natural. From this vantage point, the miller can also see the village road. A small group approaches, 2 men carrying sacks between them, and a younger boy following with a bundle of straw tied with twine. Their footsteps soften when they reach the riverbank, swallowed by the damp earth. The miller watches them for a moment before stepping back inside, letting the door close with a soft thud behind him. As more grain arrives, the air grows thicker with dust, though faint sunlight still manages to break through in narrow beams. Those beams catch the floating flour in a shimmering column, giving the mill an almost dreamlike haze. But nothing here is imaginary. Everything, from the smell of wood warmed by friction to the faint whistle of wind sneaking through gaps in the boards, belongs to the real, physical world of medieval labor. And yet, when the wheel slows unexpectedly for a moment, the miller pauses. It's slight, perhaps barely noticeable to anyone else, but he feels the subtle lag, the way the river's push doesn't match the wheel's timing for a breath or two. He turns toward the window, watching the pattern of ripples. The river looks normal, quiet, steady. Still, he waits an extra few seconds before returning to his work. Such tiny hesitations linger in the minds of people who spend a lifetime beside water. They never speak of it directly. There is no need, no benefit. But every miller along the Somme knew that the river had moods of its own. And on certain days, usually early or very late, those moods made themselves known not through sight, but through moments like this. Small, quiet deviations in rhythm that left just a faint echo of uncertainty in the air. The sun hangs a little higher now, though it remains faint and filtered through the mist that always seems to drift along the Somme. Morning light never arrives suddenly here. It seeps in slowly, the way water slides between reeds. The mill continues its steady rumble, and with every rotation of the great wheel, the building trembles in a familiar way. It is not an alarming shudder, more like a deep, reassuring breath. People who lived near mills often said that one grew accustomed to these vibrations, so much so that silence felt louder than the grinding ever could. By mid-morning, the steady trickle of villagers grows into a small cluster. Some come with grain from fields just outside Amiens, others from farther rural plots scattered across Picardy. The Somme Valley, rich with silt and slow-moving water, made good farmland, and while some years brought poor harvests, others rewarded the region with generous yields of wheat, barley, and oats. Every sack that enters the mill carries the weight of weeks, sometimes months, of labor. Plowed by hand or oxen, planted in straight lines, weeded under the summer sun, harvested with sickles that left hands blistered and aching. The miller understands this deeply. When each sack is placed before him, He handles it carefully, even with reverence. Flour is not simply flour. It is survival. Too little grinding, and the bread becomes coarse. Too much, and the millstones heat and scorch the grain. Good bread meant good meals, and good meals meant families could endure the long winters. Such thoughts, though quiet, drift naturally through the miller's mind as he works, moving his hands with practiced motions shaped by years of repetition. Outside, near the riverbank, someone begins washing vegetables in a wicker basket dipped in the Somme's slow current. Carrots, leeks, and turnips knock gently against the woven sides as the water curls through them. You can almost hear the soft splash as the basket lifts and sinks again. Medieval life relied heavily on the river, not only for mills but for washing, watering animals, soaking flax, ferrying small goods, and even serving as a landmark when giving directions. The Somme was both a guide and a provider. Further down the bank, a pair of fishermen untie their small flat-bottomed boat. These boats were common along shallow European rivers, light, easy to maneuver, and capable of gliding over the gentle currents. The men push off with a muted scrape of wood against damp stones. As they drift past the mill, they briefly raise their hands in greeting. The miller returns a nod without pausing his work. Such exchanges are simple, quiet, yet they form the threads of everyday life. Moments that pass almost unnoticed but define the entire rhythm of medieval communities. Inside the mill, the grind intensifies as more grain is poured into the hopper. The wooden chute rattles slightly as kernels slide downward, feeding between the turning stones. The sound is almost soothing, like a steady rain on a wooden roof. The air grows hazier as fine flour drifts upward in faint clouds, catching the faint beams of sunlight that sneak through cracks in the boards. In this light, each particle seems to float independently, slowly descending as if time itself has thickened. The miller occasionally brushes his arms or beard, sending off small puffs of white dust. He wipes his brow, leaving a pale smear across his forehead. Millers throughout medieval Europe were known for their ghostly appearance by midday, covered in such a layer of powder that their real age, expression, or emotion could be hard to read at first glance. They often laughed about it among themselves, though quietly, because villagers sometimes whispered that flour-covered millers looked like spirits walking out of the stones. By noon, a few villagers gather near the doorway to eat a simple meal while they wait. Bread, always bread, paired with a bit of cheese, dried fish, or an onion sliced in half. They sit on stones, tree stumps, or bundles of straw, letting their tired legs rest. They speak in that unhurried way people do when they know the day will be long but predictable. They talk about weather and harvest, about rumors of market prices in nearby towns, about repairs needed on carts or roofs. Someone mentions that a merchant passed through last week claiming he had seen a new type of plow in Flanders. Another wonders aloud whether the bishop will raise tithes this year. All the while, the mill continues its deep, rolling hum. It is the backdrop to their pauses, their breaths, their thoughts. Even when they fall silent, nothing feels empty because the wheel fills every gap. The river pushes, the paddles absorb the force, and the grinding fills the interior like a soft thunder. At certain moments, the miller steps outside to adjust the sluice gate. The wooden barrier, thick and water-swollen, groans faintly as it moves. When he lifts it, even slightly, the sound of the river changes immediately. More water rushes through the raceway, and the wheel responds by quickening its pace. Just a little, just enough to alter the vibration underfoot. This relationship between miller and river is intimate, almost delicate. He watches the water level, judges the strength of the current, and measures how much pressure the wheel can tolerate without strain. A seasoned miller does not look at numbers. He listens, he feels, he observes. A few geese wander near the mill, their soft honking mixing with the wooden groans and watery murmurs. They pick at stray grains fallen from sacks, waddling in uneven lines along the bank. One of them flaps its wings suddenly, sending a burst of feathers into the air. A child who has come with her mother giggles quietly, clutching her woolen shawl tighter as she watches. The atmosphere thickens with warmth now. Sunlight grows stronger, though it remains gentle. softened by clouds drifting low above the valley. Shadows lengthen slowly. Time feels unhurried here, as though each minute stretches to twice its length. When you imagine standing beside the mill, you feel that slowness settle inside you too. The kind of slowness that makes you breathe a little deeper, blink a little longer, and let your shoulders fall naturally into rest. Yet, even in this warmth, the villagers' old murmurs return from time to time, whispers about the river's strange moods. Someone mentions an early morning last season when the water seemed to rise without rising, shifting in odd patterns though there was no wind. Another recalls how a fisherman once said he felt watched during a foggy dawn, though he blamed it later on lack of sleep. No one claims anything supernatural. These are not people given to fantasy. They simply observe, as medieval folk often did, that nature sometimes behaves in ways the human mind does not easily arrange into tidy explanations. The Somme is calm, but memory holds many moments when calm does not mean empty. And as the wheel turns, steady as ever, the miller occasionally glances at the water with a look he never fully discusses, an expression that lasts only a breath, but carries the hint of questions he keeps to himself. The day presses onward, slowly stretching its warmth over the Somme Valley. Midday light falls with a gentle golden softness, catching on the river in patches that shimmer like faint glass fragments. By now, the mill has fully awakened, its wheel spinning in measured rhythm, paddles dipping and rising with almost imperceptible creaks. The sound settles into the marrow of the miller's bones, a low, unhurried pulse he barely notices but cannot ignore. To an outsider, it may sound monotonous, yet it carries every second of centuries-old labor within it. The careful turning of grain into flour, the slow negotiation between wood, water, and stone. Outside, the villagers are a small congregation of quiet movement. Some sit on overturned baskets while others lean against the stone walls, shifting their weight occasionally to ease aching limbs. The sacks of grain they carry are heavy, dense, and every lift leaves a subtle imprint on their posture. Medieval work was intimate with the body in ways modern life rarely allows. Muscles remembered hours, days, and even seasons of repeated motions. A miller's work is like that too. Every adjustment of a stone, every check of the sluice gate, every pause to listen to the river is informed by muscles that have memorized centuries of repetition. A boy, perhaps 10 or 11, follows close behind his mother, carrying a small bundle of barley tied in rough linen. His boots are worn thin, soles cracking against the packed dirt path, yet he steps carefully, aware of the uneven ground. Children in medieval villages learned responsibility early. They absorbed the rhythm of work without complaint. His small fingers brush against the coarse fabric as he walks, adjusting the load with an instinctive precision that comes from long observation. The miller pauses for a moment at the window to watch them. The river continues its gentle push, flowing with the patience of countless generations. Medieval chroniclers often noted that rivers like the Somme seemed to carry memory in their currents, holding the weight of human and animal footsteps along their banks. Perhaps it is nothing more than the imagination of the observer, yet there is a sense in which water does remember. How it slows for the wheel, how it brushes reeds, how it murmurs differently at bends. Inside, the grinding stones hum a consistent tone, punctuated by the occasional scrape of wooden scoops or the soft thud of a sack being emptied. The miller's assistant works steadily, adjusting small wedges and pegs with hands roughened by previous days. Dust rises in fine clouds, caught in the slanting light that spills through cracks in the timber walls. Each particle floats slowly downward, settling on surfaces already coated with a delicate layer of flour from earlier operations. Medieval mills often smelled of grain and dust, a faint sweetness undercut by the musk of wood and dampness. It is the scent of work and patience, the kind that shapes memory and defines days more clearly than hours on a clock. Outside again, a small cart pulled by a sturdy mare arrives. Its wheels sink slightly into the soft, damp earth, making muted sounds that echo faintly across the riverbank. The driver, a man of middle years, carries himself with the measured caution of one who has spent a lifetime in labor. Each motion of lifting sacks and arranging them on the cart is deliberate, precise, and practiced. There is no hurry here. The day stretches long, and the work must be done carefully. Medieval carts were heavy, unwieldy, and the smallest misstep could spill an entire load, turning hours of labor into frustration. The river itself remains patient, almost imperceptibly changing as the day advances. A few fish surface occasionally, breaking the smooth pattern of the water. Their movements are subtle, unnoticed by most. Yet to the miller who spends hours in tandem with the Somme, such small signs convey the rhythm of the ecosystem around him. The river's surface is rarely turbulent, yet it is alive in its own quiet way, carrying life, bearing grain, supporting the work of the community. Back inside the mill, the miller wipes his arms on his apron. The flour is stubborn, clinging to sleeves and hands alike. His hands are calloused, stained with the faint yellows and browns of different grains. Each grain carries a story of planting, of weather, of harvest, an unspoken history that is pressed into the flour he produces. Sacks are emptied into chutes, each flow controlled with care to maintain the consistency of the grind. Stones that have been shaped and sharpened over decades move precisely in concert with the water wheel, producing flour of variable coarseness depending on the demand. A group of women gather near the doorway, speaking in quiet murmurs as they sort through the bags of bran collected as a byproduct of milling. Bran was not waste in medieval times. It fed livestock, added bulk to porridge, or was used for medicinal purposes. The women lift and pat each bag carefully, checking for dampness or signs of spoilage. Their movements are unhurried, almost ceremonial, reflecting a rhythm learned from generations before them. Life in the villages was shaped by repetition, by patterns of labor, and by the soft music of work carried out in quiet understanding of nature's pace. By now, the sun is climbing high in the sky. Its warmth presses gently against the wooden walls of the mill, softening the shadows inside. Dust motes float lazily in the light, caught like tiny suspended stars in the air. Outside, the breeze drifts in thin lines through the gaps in the boards, carrying the scents of river, soil, and harvested grain. Every sound blends with the hum of the stones, the creak of wooden beams, the soft murmur of the wheel, the faint laughter of children balancing on river stones, the gentle clop of hooves on earth, all forming a layered, immersive tapestry of sound. The miller takes a moment to pause at the central window, leaning lightly against the sill. He watches the river's surface, the gentle shimmer of moving water reflecting the light in broken patches. A leaf floats past, turning slowly in the current. Small eddies form around stones and reeds, invisible to most, yet telling the miller where the river is deepest, how the current moves. In a world without modern measurements, this knowledge is vital. The river gives, and the river takes, but only to those who pay attention. Even the slightest disturbance is noticed. A slight hesitation in the wheel's rhythm, a subtle change in sound as grain drops from the chute, a brief misalignment in the stones. These moments, fleeting as they may be, carry significance. A seasoned miller can read them, adjusting the equipment before any serious problem arises. Such awareness is learned only through years of observation, a quiet intimacy with work that seems mundane to the untrained eye. And yet outside, the river continues as always. Calm, measured, patient. Generations have relied on it. Children will grow up alongside it. Villagers will bring grain to its banks for centuries. And the wheel of the mill, turning steadily on the Somme, will carry their labor, their efforts, and their histories in each rotation. As the afternoon drifts slowly onward, the light along the Somme softens into a muted gold, falling in long slanting stripes across the river and the mill's weathered beams. Inside, the air is thick with the gentle warmth of the day, carrying the mingled scents of flour, wood, and the river's subtle earthy tang. Every surface, tables, beams, walls, even the floor, is dusted with fine powder, a witness to centuries of grain passing through the stones. The miller moves carefully, adjusting the wooden wedges that maintain the grind, listening to the faint variations in sound as though each nuance might reveal the day's secret. The wheel outside turns tirelessly. Its paddles dip and rise, coaxed by the steady push of the river. The Somme is patient, unhurried, yet it carries a quiet insistence, pressing the wheel forward as it has for generations. Villagers know its rhythm and respect it, understanding that life in this region has always been shaped by the push and pull of water and work. The river is not just a tool, it is an enduring companion, offering both sustenance and challenge, demanding attention and care from all who rely upon it. Near the bank, children play quietly while their parents tend to the milling. They balance on stones, skip small pebbles across the water, or trace shapes in the mud with sticks. Their laughter is soft, tentative, blending seamlessly with the murmurs of the river and the constant hum of the grinding stones. Children growing up beside the Somme often learned observation early, noticing the subtle shifts in water level, the behavior of fish beneath the surface, or the changes in the reeds as the wind shifted direction. Every movement was a lesson in patience and care, as vital to survival as the grain that would later feed their families. The miller's assistant works with quiet precision. He empties sacks, monitors the flow of grain through the hopper, and sweeps the floor in slow, methodical movements. Flour settles in the air, coating his hands, hair, and clothing, yet he barely notices. This is the rhythm of labor, the harmony between body, tool, and task. Medieval mills demanded such attentiveness. A misaligned stone or a blocked chute could ruin the day's work, potentially leaving families without sufficient flour for bread. Every motion is deliberate, every pause measured. Outside, the breeze stirs the surface of the Somme. Small ripples break the reflection of clouds and trees, creating a subtle, ever-shifting mosaic of light and shadow. The river carries more than water. It bears the traces of soil and sediment, of fallen leaves and branches, of life both above and beneath its surface. Millers and villagers understand this intuitively, knowing that the river's behavior speaks volumes about upstream activity, seasonal changes, and the health of the surrounding land. A farmer approaches the mill with a small cart of oats. The wheels sink slightly into the soft earth, pressing faint impressions into the damp soil. He lifts the sacks with careful effort, grunting softly, and places them in line with those already waiting to be processed. Every motion is precise. The weight of grain is heavy, and the work, though repetitive, is unforgiving. Villagers have long relied on the Somme's mills to transform their harvest into usable flour, making the mill not only a place of labor but also of social connection and shared dependence. Inside, the miller examines the stone surfaces. He runs his fingers over the grooves, checking for uneven wear or small chips that might affect the grind. Stones were precious, carefully selected, and maintained with skill. Some had been used for decades, their surfaces shaped by countless rotations and thousands of sacks of grain. Proper maintenance was critical. Worn or cracked stones could overheat, scorch the flour, or even crack completely under pressure. Such knowledge was passed down from master to apprentice, a silent language of touch, sound, and observation. The wheel's rhythm continues outside, a steady companion to the day's labor. Its creaks and groans are soft yet resonant, echoing faintly through the mill's wooden frame. Dust motes catch in the light, drifting slowly downward, settling on work surfaces, hands, and clothing. The air is heavy with a sense of continuity, of days measured not by hours but by tasks completed, by grain transformed into sustenance. Villagers linger quietly. Some sit on stones or overturned baskets, resting their tired legs. Others speak softly in whispers, sharing news of harvests, neighboring villages, or the small, personal events of daily life. Conversation here is measured, tempered by the pace of work and the hum of the millstones. Even when words are spoken, they do not disrupt the rhythm. They are absorbed into it, adding a subtle layer to the ever-present soundscape. As afternoon stretches, the miller glances briefly out the window at the Somme. The river's surface shimmers, catching light in unexpected angles. Occasionally, a fish breaks the surface, sending a gentle ripple across the reflection. Such small disturbances are noted but rarely cause alarm. They are simply part of the river's quiet life, reminders that it is alive, flowing, and ever-present. The miller straightens and returns to the stones. Every motion is deliberate. A small adjustment here, a check of grain there, a glance at the sluice gate. This is the art of milling, an intimate dance between human, machine, and nature. Hours pass with little variation except the shifting of light and the faint changes in temperature as the sun moves westward. It is steady work, requiring patience, attentiveness, and respect for both material and process. And yet, there is always a quiet tension beneath the surface. Not fear, not urgency, but an understanding that nature can shift without warning. The river may rise or fall, storms may appear suddenly, and the wheel may falter if not properly tended. Medieval millers lived with this constant awareness, blending observation, experience, and intuition to maintain harmony with the natural forces around them. As the day drifts toward late afternoon, the wheel continues its patient turning. Villagers leave slowly, carrying sacks of freshly milled flour home, while others remain, waiting their turn. Dust rises in lazy swirls, catching the light, and the river murmurs softly against the banks. In every rotation, every scrape of stone, every ripple of water, the rhythm of life persists, quiet and enduring as it has for generations. Evening begins to approach, though the light along the Somme remains soft and golden, casting long, gentle shadows across the mill and its surroundings. The air has cooled slightly, carrying a subtle shift in scent, the sweetness of freshly ground grain mingling with the damp earth and the faint smell of river water. The mill's wooden frame expands and contracts with the temperature, creaking ever so lightly as the wheel continues its tireless turning. It is a sound so constant, so familiar, that it has become inseparable from life itself in the village. Inside, the miller works with quiet focus. He adjusts the upper stone slightly, listening to the hum of the grind as the wheel presses the water forward. The sound is a language he understands instinctively. A high note here indicates stones too close. A low note there suggests a coarseness that must be corrected. These auditory cues, refined over decades, guide him more accurately than any visual inspection could. In a world without modern instruments, this skill is as vital as any tool, and its mastery distinguishes the most reliable millers from those less practiced. The assistant moves along the floor, sweeping flour back into the chutes, adjusting sacks, and ensuring that no grain is wasted. His movements are deliberate, unhurried, yet precise, honed over long hours of apprenticeship. Even a small distraction could mean uneven flour or a disrupted flow, and the work demands constant attention. Medieval mills were unforgiving in their consistency. A single misstep might mean that a family received insufficient flour, or that a day's labor was wasted. Outside, the river flows with the same measured patience it has carried for centuries. Its surface reflects the fading light, broken occasionally by a gentle ripple or the movement of a fish. The wheel's paddles push steadily against this current, each turn sending vibrations through the mill's beams. To the miller, these subtle tremors are comforting, a tangible sign that the machinery is in harmony with the river. Villagers often remark that sitting inside a functioning mill was like sitting at the very heart of life, the pulse of the community transmitted through wood, stone, and water. A small group of villagers remains outside, chatting softly while waiting their turn. Their voices blend with the hum of the mill and the gentle murmur of the river, forming a layered symphony of human and natural sounds. Women check their baskets, children fidget, and men adjust the straps on sacks or carts. Every motion is deliberate, reflecting a rhythm learned over years, a slow understanding of work, patience, and seasonal cycles. The miller steps briefly to the window to observe the river's flow. The Somme is calm now, almost hypnotic in its steady movement. The light glimmers off patches of water, highlighting the tiny eddies and currents that shift subtly from minute to minute. A branch floats past, turning slowly in the current. He notes its path silently. Even small objects reveal the water's mood, giving clues about unseen obstructions or shifts upstream. Knowledge like this is vital for a miller, yet it is often acquired quietly, through decades of observation and interaction with both machine and nature. Inside again, the stones grind on, producing the rhythmic hum that has become the soundscape of the entire afternoon. Dust rises in slow clouds, settling on beams, floors, and clothing. The light filtering through the windows catches these particles, turning them into faint, golden swirls that seem almost alive. The air is heavy with the scent of flower, and every breath carries the essence of harvest, work, and endurance. This is the environment that has shaped millers for generations, a world defined by its cadence and by the intimate knowledge of natural forces. Villagers begin to prepare for their departure. Some lift sacks of fresh flour, careful to keep the weight balanced across shoulders or carts. Others gather small bundles of bran or leftover grain. Conversations are soft and deliberate, discussing plans for baking, feeding livestock, or preparing for evening meals. The day's labor, though repetitive, carries an understated dignity, every movement a thread woven into the fabric of community life. The miller takes a moment to pause near the sluice gate. Water rushes past with the same consistency it has maintained all day. He adjusts the gate slightly, easing the pressure on the wheel, ensuring that the stones maintain their correct speed. Even small adjustments have noticeable effects, and centuries of accumulated knowledge guide his touch. Medieval mills were highly sensitive systems. Water, wood, and stone needed constant monitoring. Only through experience could a miller anticipate problems before they became serious. As the late afternoon deepens, shadows lengthen, and the golden light softens further. Dust motes drift lazily in the beams of sunlight, moving almost imperceptibly with drafts that slip through the building's gaps. The wheel turns steadily, the stones hum, and the river continues its tireless flow. Outside, villagers collect their remaining flour, whispering last-minute instructions or advice for family members. Children begin to tire, leaning against stones or resting in their caregivers' arms, while adults carry the day's harvest back toward the village. In these final hours before dusk, the mill becomes almost meditative. The repetitive sounds of grinding, creaking wood, and flowing water intertwine with the soft human activity, creating a living rhythm that seems to extend beyond the physical space. Even fleeting sounds, a bird settling on a branch outside, a fish breaking the river's surface, a soft shuffle of feet, blend seamlessly into the ambient hum. Time slows, measured not by hours but by task and observation, a rhythm as old as the mill itself. Yet beneath the calm, there is always a subtle awareness. The river can rise, the stones can falter, and weather can shift unexpectedly. This quiet tension, however, is not anxiety but vigilance, a learned understanding of the delicate balance between human effort and the natural world. A miller's life is intertwined with these forces, a slow, deliberate dance requiring attention, patience, and respect. Evening approaches fully now. The river glints with reflected sunset light, and the wheel continues to turn, though more slowly as the flow eases slightly. Villagers depart, carrying the day's labor home, leaving only the miller and his assistant. Their movements are careful and deliberate as they perform the last checks, adjusting stones, ensuring the sluice is secure, and confirming that nothing is left to shift overnight. The Somme flows on, calm and measured, whispering softly against its banks. And as the mill quiets into the approaching night, there is a lingering sense of continuity. Every rotation of the wheel, every dust-laden breath, every soft creak of wood connects the present to generations past. The Somme and its mill are patient, enduring, and quietly watchful, preserving the rhythm of life in their steady, unhurried way. Night begins to creep slowly across the Somme valley, softening the colors of the surrounding fields and casting long shadows along the riverbank. The air grows cooler, carrying the faint, lingering scent of freshly ground grain mixed with damp earth. Inside the mill, the wheel turns steadily, though its motion is slower now, responding to the gentler push of the river at dusk. The low, constant hum of the stones is familiar, almost hypnotic, as if the mill itself breathes alongside the river. The miller moves deliberately through the interior, adjusting the sluice and checking the alignment of the stones one last time for the day. Each movement is precise, informed by decades of experience and the intimate knowledge of the machinery and water. He runs his fingers along the stone surfaces, feeling the faint grooves worn smooth by countless rotations, listening for the slightest irregularity in sound or vibration. These subtle cues, imperceptible to the untrained ear, carry vital information about the flow of grain, the speed of the stones, and the pressure of the water. Outside, the river reflects the dimming light in muted silvers and grays, broken occasionally by the movement of fish beneath its surface. The gentle rustle of reeds along the bank accompanies the wheel's rhythm, creating a layered symphony of natural sounds. Birds return to hidden branches or settle in the reeds, their quiet calls blending into the soft murmur of flowing water. Medieval villagers relied on these small signals to understand the rhythm of their environment. The subtle changes in wind, water, or wildlife often indicated approaching weather, shifting currents, or seasonal transitions. The assistant finishes sweeping the remaining dust and loose grain, carefully pushing it toward the collection points. Flour rises in fine clouds with each motion, drifting lazily in the dimming light. It settles slowly, coating surfaces that have been worked upon all day. The texture of dust and flour, combined with the faint warmth inside the mill, creates a tactile environment unique to this type of labor. It is a quiet, repetitive work, yet filled with nuance and awareness, a dance between human effort and natural forces. Villagers have largely departed now, carrying their sacks of flour home along the soft, worn paths that lead away from the river. Their departures leave a gentle silence, punctuated only by the sound of the wheel, the subtle vibrations of the stones, and the occasional creak of the wooden beams as they settle. The presence of people, though diminished, lingers in the air. The faint scent of labor, dust on clothing, soft echoes of conversation, and the distant calls of children returning home. The miller steps briefly outside to observe the river. The Somme is calm, almost imperceptibly slower than it was during midday, yet its flow remains persistent. He watches as a few stray leaves drift past, carried by the gentle current. To an untrained eye, these are insignificant movements. To a miller, each indicates the subtle changes in water behavior, tiny hints that the river communicates to those patient enough to listen. Centuries of milling along the Somme have taught the same lesson repeatedly. Patience, observation, and respect for natural forces are the essence of life here. Inside, the hum of the wheel and stones continues, blending with the quiet of dusk. Dust motes float slowly through the fading light, suspended like tiny stars in a vast, invisible sky. The miller adjusts a small wooden wedge, fine-tuning the pressure of the stones. Each minor correction produces a subtle change in sound, a slight lowering of pitch, a faint shift in rhythm. It is these delicate adjustments that define the skill of a miller, the mastery of a craft honed over decades and measured in infinitesimal changes, almost imperceptible to those who have not spent years listening to the stones. The soft creak of beams and the occasional drip of water echo quietly through the empty mill. The miller moves with deliberate care, his motions slow and precise, yet imbued with the rhythm of repetition. Every detail matters. The alignment of the stones, the flow of the grain, the pressure of the wheel against its axle, and the level of water against the paddles. Neglecting any element could disturb the delicate balance of machinery and river, affecting the quality of the flour and the efficiency of the operation. Outside, the wind whispers through the trees and reeds, carrying the faint scent of damp soil and the river. The valley feels quiet, almost suspended in a liminal space between day and night. Even the animals, geese, ducks, and small livestock grazing near the river, seem attuned to this soft transition, their movements subdued, deliberate, and careful. The miller notices, as he often does, how life in this region follows natural rhythms more closely than clocked hours, responding to light, water, and the slow progression of seasons. A lone child returns briefly to watch the wheel turn, her small hands clutching a bundle of straw she had carried from home. She stands quietly, observing the movement, fascinated by the endless, steady turning of paddles in the water. Her curiosity is measured, respectful, as she has seen her parents and neighbors work alongside the mill for years. Children in these villages absorb patterns and rhythms naturally, learning patience and attentiveness not through instruction, but by immersion in daily life. The last carts have departed, the remaining villagers now fully returned home. The miller moves through the building one final time, checking locks, ensuring the sluice is secure, and confirming that the stones are positioned correctly for the night. Dust settles around him, fine and soft, coating the wooden floors and beams. The wheel continues to turn, slower now, driven by the subtle current of the river. Its motion is steady, unhurried, yet persistent, a quiet testament to endurance and the passage of time. The miller pauses at the window for a final glance at the river. Moonlight begins to shimmer faintly on its surface, broken only by gentle ripples. He breathes slowly, absorbing the calm of the valley. Here, in the quiet between labor and rest, there is a continuity that has existed for generations. The river, the wheel, the stones, they endure beyond individual lives, carrying history in their steady motions. And in this soft twilight, as the valley slips fully into evening, the mill seems to sigh with contentment. The day's labor is complete, yet the wheel will turn again tomorrow, as it has always done, linking the efforts of past, present, and future into an unbroken chain of rhythm and work. The Somme whispers softly, a patient observer of centuries, holding the pulse of village life, the essence of labor, and the quiet endurance of time itself. Night deepens over the Somme Valley, the world outside the mill cloaked in muted blues and silvers. The air carries a gentle chill, dampened slightly by the lingering warmth of the river. The wheel turns steadily, slow and deliberate, its paddles slicing through the water with soft, rhythmic splashes. The hum of the grinding stones inside forms a quiet undercurrent, filling the mill with an almost meditative resonance. It is a sound both constant and unchanging, a testament to labor and endurance that has persisted for generations. Inside, the miller moves with careful, deliberate steps, inspecting the stones and ensuring that everything is in balance for the night. Even as activity outside has ceased, his attentiveness does not waver. Each rotation of the stones produces a subtle vibration, a pulse that can be felt through the floorboards and into his feet. He runs his hands along the grooves of the upper stone, tracing the faint indentations left by countless sacks of grain, a tactile record of history pressed into the surface of the mill. Outside, the river reflects the pale moonlight, breaking it into ripples and faint gleams that shift slowly with the current. Reeds along the bank sway gently, whispering with the soft wind. Fish disturb the water occasionally, their movements subtle yet noticeable to a trained eye. The miller watches quietly from the window, observing the minute signs that indicate the river's behavior. Though night has fallen, the Somme remains alive with subtle life, carrying currents, sediments, and the distant memory of centuries. Inside, the assistant finishes tidying the final traces of dust and grain, sweeping carefully toward the collection areas. Flour rises in delicate clouds, illuminated faintly by the soft beams of moonlight filtering through cracks in the timber walls. The mill's interior is bathed in a calm glow, shadows stretching along the worn floors and wooden supports. Every surface bears the faint, enduring mark of labor. Scratches on the beams, dust settled in corners, and faint impressions of tools long used. The miller pauses near the sluice gate, listening to the subtle differences in water pressure against the paddles. A small change in current can alter the rhythm of the wheel and stones, and centuries of experience allow him to detect the tiniest variation. Even slight irregularities are attended to with careful adjustments, turning a wooden peg, shifting a wedge, nudging the sluice. These motions are precise and deliberate, carried out with the quiet confidence of someone intimately connected to the flow of both water and grain. The river continues its gentle passage, its surface reflecting both the moon and the faint stars above. Occasionally, a fish breaks through the surface, sending small ripples outward. A pair of nocturnal birds settle in the reeds, their faint calls merging with the hum of the wheel. All these sounds blend into a layered symphony, the natural environment harmonizing with the slow, deliberate work of the mill. In this setting, time feels suspended, measured not by the passage of hours but by the steady, continuous rhythm of life along the Somme. A gentle breeze drifts through the mill, slipping through the small gaps in the boards. It carries the scents of river, soil, and flower, weaving them together into a faint, persistent aroma that settles on the skin and clothing. Such details, subtle yet ever-present, define the sensory experience of a medieval mill. Every breath carries information, The direction of the wind, the moisture of the air, the warmth or coolness that might affect grain and machinery. Observation is constant, though often subconscious, a quiet vigilance that protects both work and livelihood. The miller moves to check the final sacks of grain waiting to be processed in the morning. Each is carefully placed, ensuring that nothing shifts overnight. The weight of the grain is familiar, a tactile connection to the labor that brought it here. Sacks are heavy, dense, and must be handled with care. A careless shift could damage the grain or affect the flow through the hopper. And so every action, even at night, is deliberate and measured. Outside, the village is quiet. The roads and fields beyond the Somme are empty, illuminated faintly by moonlight. Occasional rustlings of animals, or the distant sound of a horse's hooffall, are absorbed into the ambient rhythm of the night. Life continues beyond the mill, yet the wheel remains the steady anchor, turning tirelessly against the current. Its presence is a reminder of constancy, of work that endures beyond individual lifetimes, and of the deep relationship between people, water, and nature. Inside, the hum of the stones slows as the miller makes final adjustments, ensuring that the equipment will rest in perfect balance. Dust settles into corners and crevices, a gentle reminder of the day's labor. The miller moves slowly, methodically, aware of every sound, every vibration, every breath. Even in darkness, his senses are alert to the minutiae of the mill's rhythm. The subtle creak of timber, the almost imperceptible change in stone tone, the quiet push of water against the wheel. The assistant finishes the last task, straightening tools and wiping down wooden surfaces. The environment is calm, quiet, and heavy with the scent of flour and wood. Every detail carries a memory, every surface a record of work that spans generations. The mill, while functioning as a place of labor, also serves as a vessel of continuity, holding within its walls the steady pulse of human effort and natural forces intertwined. The wheel continues its unceasing turn, its sound a constant companion to the night. The stones grind slowly, creating a rhythm that echoes faintly through the wooden beams and into the earth itself. This is the heartbeat of the mill, steady and enduring, carrying with it centuries of history. Outside, the river's surface glimmers faintly, reflecting the movements of wind and water, a living mirror of the world around it. The miller pauses once more at the window, observing the soft movement of the river and the quiet of the surrounding fields. Even in darkness, there is clarity here. The rhythms of water, the patterns of wind, the subtleties of light and shadow. Observation, patience, and attentiveness remain essential, a quiet awareness that defines life beside the Somme. And as the night settles fully, the mill becomes a sanctuary of calm. The wheel turns steadily, the stones hum their low song, and the river flows with quiet determination. The world beyond continues, but here, in this place of labor and endurance, time is measured differently. By rhythm, by sound, by the steady, tireless work of generations past and present. The night stretches slowly, deepening over the Somme Valley as a soft, silver light drapes the landscape. The air is still, carrying the faint, lingering scent of flower mixed with the dampness of the river and the earthy aroma of soil along the banks. The wheel turns steadily, its paddles slicing the gentle current with a rhythmic, tireless motion. Each rotation produces a faint, low murmur that resonates through the mill, threading itself into the wooden beams and stone floors, creating a continuity of sound both constant and enduring. Inside, the miller walks deliberately along the worn planks, adjusting the small wedges that maintain the stone's alignment. The upper stone hums softly beneath his fingers, a tone both familiar and precise. This hum is a language, a subtle communication of pressure, friction, and flow that only a skilled miller can interpret. Centuries of knowledge are embedded in these motions. A slight misalignment, a brief hesitation, or an unnoticed shift in tone could disrupt the quality of the grind or the safety of the machinery. Every sound carries meaning, and every touch is measured with careful attention. Outside, the river carries faint reflections of moonlight in shifting patterns across its surface. Reeds along the bank sway gently, producing a quiet rustle that blends into the continuous hum of the wheel. Small fish break the surface occasionally, sending soft ripples that spread outward before settling into the calm current. This is the language of nature, subtle and patient, and those who work beside it for years learn to listen deeply, to notice changes in current, wind, and movement that hint at unseen forces upstream or shifts in seasonal patterns. The assistant moves quietly, sweeping the remaining flour dust toward collection areas, smoothing the surfaces of wooden beams, and checking the final grain for proper alignment. His movements are deliberate yet unhurried, a reflection of the careful rhythm that defines life inside the mill. Even small errors are attended to immediately. The sensitivity of the machinery demands constant attention. Medieval milling was an interplay of precision and patience, requiring a harmony between human effort, natural forces, and mechanical labor. Outside, the night is nearly complete, yet the Somme flows endlessly, its current steady and reliable. The occasional call of an owl or the rustle of a nocturnal creature in the reeds adds subtle texture to the quiet, layering the natural sounds of the valley with the faint mechanical murmurs from the mill. The river and the mill exist in tandem, a continuous dialogue between natural energy and human skill, each supporting the other in unbroken rhythm. The miller pauses at the window, watching the subtle play of light on the water's surface. A leaf floats downstream, turning slowly in the current. Though small and seemingly insignificant, such movements offer insight into the river's behavior. Hints about depth, flow, and the subtle eddies that might affect the wheel's motion. To the miller, these are not trivial. They are observations steeped in centuries of tradition, learned over years of daily labor beside water and stone. Inside, the wheel continues its tireless turn, each rotation pressing the water forward, feeding the millstones that hum in low, continuous vibration. Dust rises lazily, catching in the moonlight and drifting down slowly to settle on every surface. The wooden beams, worn smooth by years of labor, creak softly under the vibration, a gentle reminder of the building's age and endurance. Every sound, every movement is a part of a larger rhythm, steady, reliable, and enduring. The assistant pauses to adjust the flow of grain through the hopper, nudging the wooden planks slightly to ensure smooth passage. The texture of the grain is checked by touch, a skill learned over long hours of observation and practice. Medieval mills depended entirely on the miller's ability to judge quality by feel, sound, and subtle visual cues. There were no instruments to measure consistency or coarseness. Everything was human, tactile, and observed with patience. Outside, a gentle breeze stirs, lifting the faint scent of flour, damp earth, and river water. Reeds whisper against each other, and the occasional distant call of an animal echoes across the valley. The mill, enclosed and warm, contains these sounds, layering them with the hum of stones and wheel. Time here is measured differently, by the consistency of grind, the turning of paddles, and the patient work of human hands. Each rotation of the wheel is a heartbeat, each dust-laden breath a continuation of centuries-old rhythm. The miller makes one final check of the sluice gate and the stone alignment, ensuring that all is balanced for the night. Each adjustment is deliberate, slight, yet precise. Even a minor shift can alter the course of the machinery or the quality of the flour. The patience required for such work is constant, and the reward is in the continuity itself. The assurance that the mill will resume its rhythm tomorrow, just as it has for generations. The wheel turns steadily, and the river flows endlessly beside it. Dust settles, and the faint creaks of timber punctuate the low hum of stones. Every element, the river, the wheel, the stones, the hands that tend them, is in a delicate, careful harmony. The miller, though alone now, is never separate from the rhythm of life he helps maintain. Centuries of labor, patience, and observation converge here, embodied in the slow, steady motions of machinery, water, and human skill. And as night deepens, the valley grows still. The Somme whispers softly against its banks, carrying memories of work, life, and the passage of generations. The wheel continues its tireless turning, the stones hum their persistent song, and the mill rests in perfect balance, a sanctuary of enduring rhythm and quiet patience. The moon rises higher, spilling pale silver light across the Somme valley. Its reflection dances faintly on the river's surface, breaking into gentle ripples that shimmer with every slight current. The wheel of the mill turns steadily, paddles dipping and rising with the quiet insistence of water moving endlessly. The hum of the grinding stones fills the interior, low and constant, vibrating softly through the wooden beams and stone floors. It is a sound that has persisted for centuries, a rhythm tied intimately to both nature and human labor. Inside, the miller walks slowly among the equipment, hands tracing the grooves of the stones as he listens to their subtle hum. The flow of grain is steady, smooth, a testament to careful adjustments made over the course of the day. Each minor tweak, slight shifts of the sluice gate, the nudge of a wooden wedge, produces noticeable changes in sound and vibration. Experience, observation, and patience guide every motion. Even the smallest error could upset the balance of wheel, stone, and water. Outside, the river continues its quiet passage, carrying leaves, small debris, and faint sediment along with its life-giving current. Fish disturb the surface occasionally, creating fleeting ripples that momentarily interrupt the moonlight's reflection. Reeds along the bank sway gently, whispering with the breeze. These small movements, though often overlooked, are subtle indicators of the river's mood and behavior. A miller attuned to such signs can anticipate changes in flow, the arrival of rain, or the subtle shifts that might affect the wheel's operation. The assistant moves quietly, attending to the last grains, smoothing wooden surfaces, and checking the alignment of the chutes. Dust rises in faint clouds, illuminated by moonlight seeping through cracks in the walls. Every surface bears the marks of human labor: worn planks, faint scratches, patches of flour dust accumulated over centuries. The environment is alive with history, each object telling a story of work, patience, and care. Villagers have long since departed for the night, leaving only the miller and his assistant. The quiet is deep, broken only by the faint creak of beams, the soft splash of the wheel's paddles, and the continuous hum of the stones. Time here feels suspended, measured not in hours but in rotations, vibrations, and breaths of air scented with flour, wood, and water. The mill exists as both a place of labor and a repository of continuity, linking past generations with the present and those yet to come. The miller pauses at the window to observe the river. The current is gentle now, carrying with it the faint reflections of clouds and stars. Small leaves float slowly downstream, their path a subtle lesson in patience. Even the smallest details of movement can convey information: the depth of water, hidden eddies, or variations in flow that may impact the wheel overnight. To a medieval miller, such awareness is as essential as the tools and techniques of his trade. Inside, the hum of the stones continues, a soft, soothing vibration that fills the space. Dust motes drift lazily, catching faint moonlight and settling slowly on beams, floors, and equipment. The miller's movements are careful and deliberate, each adjustment and inspection carried out with a precision honed over decades. The wheel outside maintains its steady, unhurried pace, a tireless companion to the human effort within. A faint wind drifts through the mill, lifting the scent of flour and river, weaving them together into an invisible tapestry of experience. The sounds of the wheel, the stones, and the river blend into a singular rhythm, punctuated only by the occasional soft creak of timber or the distant rustle of nocturnal animals. Life in this setting is deeply intertwined with the natural environment, each element influencing the other in a delicate balance maintained through careful attention. The assistant makes a final round, ensuring that the last grain is aligned properly and that all surfaces are smooth and ready for the next day's work. Each motion is precise, informed by an understanding of the machinery and the materials being processed. Medieval milling demanded this constant vigilance. Nothing could be left to chance. Every adjustment is small, deliberate, and meaningful, part of a continuous cycle that links labor, nature, and time. Outside, the river's surface shifts subtly under the moonlight. The gentle ripples, the occasional disturbance by fish, and the sway of reeds create an ever-changing, quiet spectacle. The miller observes, attentive to the small, almost imperceptible changes that indicate the river's behavior. Knowledge of these subtle cues allows him to anticipate potential issues with the wheel and stones, ensuring that the rhythm of the mill continues uninterrupted. As the night deepens, the wheel turns tirelessly, The stones hum steadily, and the river flows with quiet determination. Dust settles, moonlight shifts, and the beams creak gently, marking the passage of time. The miller and his assistant move with deliberate care, tending to the machinery, adjusting flow, and ensuring balance. Every motion is part of a larger rhythm, a meditation in patience and endurance. Even as darkness envelopes the valley, there is a sense of continuity and resilience. The Somme, the mill, the stones, and the hands that guide them form an unbroken chain of labor and observation. The wheel, though simple in design, carries centuries of knowledge within its turning, each rotation a heartbeat of history and human endeavor. And as the night reaches its deepest hour, the mill rests in perfect harmony with the river and the quiet of the valley. The hum of the stones, the soft splash of the wheel, and the gentle whispers of the river create a world of calm, a sanctuary shaped by labor, patience, and observation. The cycle continues, steady and unbroken, carrying with it the quiet, enduring pulse of life along the Somme. The first hints of pre-dawn light begin to filter across the Somme valley, soft and muted, brushing the river with pale silver and faint gold. The night has been long and quiet, yet the mill has never truly slept. The wheel turns steadily, paddles dipping and rising in silent rhythm with the river's flow. The stones hum low and constant, vibrating gently through the timber and stone of the building. This sound, ancient and familiar, marks the passage of time in a world that moves according to work, water, and seasons rather than hours and clocks. Inside, the miller moves slowly, adjusting wedges and inspecting the stones one last time. His hands, worn and calloused, trace the grooves worn smooth over decades of labor. Each slight irregularity in the stone surface is noted, each subtle change in sound or vibration carefully measured. Medieval milling is a craft of observation and patience. There are no instruments to measure speed or texture. Every adjustment is tactile, auditory, and deeply intuitive. The slightest oversight could affect the quality of flour, disrupt the balance of machinery, or even damage the stones. The river outside glimmers faintly in the approaching light. Its surface is calm, almost hypnotic, broken occasionally by the rise of a fish or the drift of leaves. Reeds along the banks sway gently with the morning breeze, their soft rustle blending seamlessly with the hum of the wheel and stones. To the miller, these subtle motions speak volumes, an almost imperceptible shift in flow, a hidden eddy, or the depth of water over the paddles. Such observations, developed over years of patient labor, ensure the wheel and stones maintain their rhythm through day and night alike. The assistant moves quietly, sweeping flour from the boards and checking the alignment of grain in the hoppers. Every motion is deliberate, unhurried, yet precise. Medieval milling demanded such care. The machinery and water were unforgiving, requiring constant attention. Even a minor disruption in flow or a misalignment could ripple through the system, affecting the quality of flour and the efficiency of work. The hands of both miller and assistant carry the weight of centuries of practice, learned through observation, repetition, and careful listening to the nuances of wood, stone, and water. As dawn approaches, the light strengthens slowly, casting long shadows across the valley. The river reflects pale colors of sky and clouds, broken into fragments by gentle ripples. The mill stands quiet yet alive, its wheel continuing its tireless rotation. Dust motes hang in the soft beams of light filtering through cracks in the timber, drifting lazily before settling on worn planks, tools, and machinery. The atmosphere is thick with a sense of flour, damp wood, and river, a sensory record of labor, endurance, and continuity. The miller steps briefly to the window, observing the flow of the Somme. Even in the stillness, the river moves with persistent determination. Small debris floats past, leaves, twigs, and tiny sediment, each shift a subtle message about the water upstream. The miller notes these silently, internalizing them as he has done for decades. The relationship between river and mill is one of attentiveness, respect, and careful balance. Without it, the rhythm of grinding stones and turning wheel could not endure. Inside, the hum of the stones continues, resonant and gentle. The wheel's paddles move in perfect harmony with the river's flow, each rotation a measured beat in the quiet symphony of work. The assistant adjusts the flow of grain slightly, listening to the stones and feeling the texture of flour under his fingers. The process is repetitive yet dynamic, requiring subtle judgment and continuous attention. There is no rush. Precision and patience govern every motion. Outside, birds begin their early calls, soft and tentative, adding a natural melody to the quiet mechanical rhythm. The valley slowly awakens, though the mill remains a sanctuary of stillness. The wheel turns, the stones hum, and the river continues, unaffected by the brief stirrings of life on its banks. The miller breathes slowly, feeling the pulse of centuries under his feet, the rhythm of work and water that links the present to generations past. By mid-morning, the first villagers begin arriving, carrying baskets and carts with grain. The mill, though calm and quiet through the night, now begins to stir with the familiar energy of labor. The wheel's rotation remains steady, unaffected by the increase in activity, yet the air is now filled with soft sounds of movement, conversation, and the rustle of grain. Each person contributes to the rhythm, moving deliberately, guided by experience and awareness. The miller oversees operations with quiet authority, adjusting the stone alignment and sluice gates to accommodate the varying textures and quantities of grain. His movements are precise, informed by long familiarity with both equipment and river. Each adjustment ensures continuity, a seamless link between night's tireless work and the labor of the day. The assistant mirrors these motions, attentive to subtle changes in stone tone, wheel pressure, and grain flow. Outside, the Somme reflects sunlight in a muted shimmer, carrying the river's whispers downstream. Every small ripple, every movement of debris, and every shift in the water surface is noted silently. Knowledge of these signs is crucial. Centuries of milling along the Somme have proven the value of careful observation. Even the slightest change in current can influence the efficiency of grinding and the quality of the product. The village begins to wake fully, and the rhythm of the mill becomes a central heartbeat of daily life. Carts arrive, grain is weighed and measured, and sacks are aligned for processing. The wheel continues, paddles dipping rhythmically, stones humming, and the river flowing with patient consistency. Dust rises in thin, swirling clouds, settling slowly, carrying the scent of work and life. The mill stands as both a functional site of labor and a living monument to centuries of human perseverance. And so, the day begins, flowing seamlessly from the tireless night. The wheel turns, stones hum, and the river whispers its quiet song. The rhythm of work, observation, and patient attention endures, binding the miller, the river, and the village into a continuous cycle of life and labor, linking past, present, and the promise of tomorrow. By mid-morning, the Somme Valley is fully awake, bathed in soft sunlight that sparkles over the water. The air carries a mixture of scents: freshly turned earth, damp riverbank, and the ever-present aroma of flour from the mill. The wheel turns with steady reliability, paddles slicing through the current with tireless rhythm. Inside, the stones hum a constant vibration that reverberates through the beams and floorboards. This is the heartbeat of the mill, unchanged through centuries, linking generations past, present, and future in a seamless rhythm of labor and observation. The miller walks carefully among the equipment, adjusting wedges and sluices with hands calloused by decades of work. Each minor adjustment is a subtle negotiation between the motion of the wheel, the flow of water, and the pressure of grain through the hopper. He listens closely to the hum of the stones, reading subtle changes in pitch and vibration that might indicate a need for intervention. Medieval milling is as much a skill of hearing as it is of touch and sight. The miller interprets each sound as a precise language, a dialogue between man, machine, and river. The assistant moves with practiced precision, sweeping flour, checking the alignment of grain, and ensuring that all chutes and hoppers function smoothly. His motions are deliberate, never rushed, and fully in tune with the rhythm of the mill. Every small correction is significant, a slight nudge here, a minor adjustment there. The balance of water, stone, and grain requires constant vigilance. Even the most routine task demands attention, as the machinery is sensitive to the slightest change. Outside, the river flows with gentle persistence. The surface glimmers in sunlight, broken by ripples from fish or drifting debris. Reeds along the bank sway in harmony with the wind, adding a soft rustle to the background of the mill's hum. The wheel paddles push against the current, translating the river's energy into motion for the stones. The miller watches carefully, noting small signs. An eddy here, a leaf trapped momentarily against a paddle there. Knowledge that centuries of work have made instinctive. Villagers arrive intermittently, bringing grain for milling. The wheels turning, the stones hum, and the soft creak of beams blend seamlessly with the low murmur of conversation, the shuffling of feet, and the shifting of heavy sacks. Life around the mill is measured by rhythm rather than clock, each action part of a larger flow, connecting work, water, and human labor in continuous harmony. Children, quiet and observant, watch the wheels spin and stones grind, absorbing lessons of patience and attentiveness without words, learning by immersion in the cycle of daily life. The miller pauses to inspect the flow of grain through the hopper, adjusting small wooden wedges to ensure even distribution. Each adjustment subtly alters the stone's interaction with the grain, the hum shifting imperceptibly as the upper stone engages more or less pressure. These fine calibrations require decades of familiarity with both machinery and natural forces. Even minor misjudgments could result in coarser flour or increased wear on the stones, emphasizing the delicate balance necessary for consistent milling. Outside, birds call softly from nearby trees, and insects begin their low hum in the fields beyond the river. The Somme itself continues its tireless journey, a patient observer of centuries, moving past trees, reeds, and the foundations of the mill. The river and the mill exist in symbiosis. Each relies on the other, and centuries of accumulated experience allow the miller to maintain the balance, anticipating subtle changes that might affect the wheel's motion or stone alignment. Inside, dust rises slowly, caught in beams of light filtering through small windows. The assistant sweeps and organizes, ensuring that every surface is prepared for continuous operation. Every plank, beam, and stone tells a story. Grooves worn smooth by sacks of grain, scratches from tools used for centuries, faint dust patterns that record the rhythm of work over time. The mill is more than a functional space. It is a living chronicle of labor, observation, and endurance. The hum of the stones blends with the river's flow and the wheel's constant turning, forming a continuous symphony of sound. Every rotation, every vibration, every creak is meaningful, a signal interpreted by those skilled enough to read it. The miller adjusts sluices and wedges methodically, guided by instinct and experience. Each subtle correction maintains the harmony of water, stone, and grain, ensuring the continuity of production and the preservation of rhythm established over generations. As midday approaches, sunlight filters through higher windows, casting long shadows along the floor and highlighting the gentle swirl of dust in the air. The wheel paddles continue their tireless motion, the stones hum steadily, and the river flows endlessly beside them. Outside, the village moves in harmony with the mill, children and adults carrying the results of yesterday's work, preparing for the next stage of daily life, all tied to the central heartbeat of the mill's operations. The miller takes a brief moment to pause, resting his hands on a worn beam, listening to the sounds around him. The subtle vibrations of stones, the gentle splash of water, and the faint creaks of timber combine into a comforting rhythm. This is a rhythm learned over a lifetime, a constant reminder that time in this place is measured not by hours, but by the steady, patient movement of the wheel, the stones, and the river itself. Even as work continues, there is a pervasive calm. Each rotation of the wheel, each minor adjustment of stone or sluice, is both action and meditation. The miller and his assistant work within this continuous loop of observation, correction, and maintenance, their labor synchronized with the unchanging rhythm of nature. Outside, the Somme carries leaves, fish, and debris onward, a silent companion to human toil and endurance, a constant witness to the life and labor of generations. And as the morning moves toward afternoon, the cycle of work remains unbroken. The wheel turns, the stones hum, and the river whispers softly, marking the passage of time with a patience unmatched by any clock. The mill is alive with sound, movement, and presence, a living testament to centuries of human labor harmonized with the eternal flow of the Somme. Afternoon settles slowly over the Somme Valley, the sunlight soft and warm, illuminating the fields, river, and mill in gentle tones. The river glimmers faintly, moving with steady persistence, carrying leaves, twigs, and subtle sediments downstream. The wheel continues its constant rotation, paddles dipping and rising with quiet insistence, translating the river's energy into motion for the grinding stones. The low, constant hum of the stones resonates through the wooden beams and stone floors, creating a rhythm that has persisted for generations. Inside the mill, the miller moves deliberately, adjusting wedges and sluices with careful precision. His hands are worn, calloused from decades of labor, yet each touch is measured and gentle. The stones respond subtly to pressure, and the miller listens intently to the hum, detecting variations that could indicate slight imbalances or changes in grain flow. This skill is honed over years of careful observation, combining tactile knowledge with auditory cues and a deep understanding of natural forces. The assistant sweeps dust and loose grain from the floor, arranging hoppers, and checking the alignment of the grain as it moves through the mill. His movements are quiet, deliberate, and synchronized with the rhythm of the stones and wheel. Even small adjustments can make a significant difference in the efficiency and quality of the milling process. Every motion, every observation, carries centuries of accumulated wisdom, a testament to the long tradition of human labor beside water and stone. Outside, the river moves quietly but persistently. Its surface reflects the sunlight in shifting patterns, broken by occasional fish or drifting leaves. Reeds along the bank sway softly with the breeze, adding a gentle whisper to the layered symphony of sound. Each subtle change in current, each shift in flow, is noted by the miller, providing information essential to maintaining the harmony of wheel, stones, and water. The river is both companion and teacher, a constant presence demanding respect and attentiveness. Villagers come and go intermittently, delivering sacks of grain or collecting flour. Their movements are soft, careful, in rhythm with the mill's ongoing operations. Children watch quietly, learning without instruction, absorbing the patterns of labor and attentiveness through observation. The mill is not only a site of production but also a place of learning, where the natural and mechanical worlds converge in lessons of patience, observation, and endurance. The miller pauses briefly, resting a hand on the edge of a stone, listening to the subtle vibrations and low hum. Every rotation of the wheel, every shift of grain, every minor sound carries meaning. Medieval milling was a craft of precision and observation, reliant on a continuous dialogue between human and nature, machinery and water. Even the smallest deviation could ripple through the system, affecting the quality of the flour and the efficiency of labor. The afternoon light shifts, casting long, soft shadows through the wooden windows. Dust motes hang in the beams of light, moving slowly as air shifts subtly with the passing wind. The assistant adjusts small wooden chutes to maintain even grain flow, listening to the hum and feeling the vibration of the stones beneath his feet. Every movement is deliberate, part of a continuous cycle of maintenance, correction, and observation. Outside, birds begin to settle for the evening, their calls soft and intermittent. The Somme carries on its tireless flow, silent witness to centuries of labor, its water shaping the mill's rhythm and reflecting the sunlight in gentle patterns. Leaves drift slowly downstream, twirling and turning in the current, small signs of the river's ever-present movement. The miller watches, learning from the subtleties of nature in the same way his predecessors have done for generations. Inside, the mill continues its steady rhythm. Stones hum, the wheel turns, and the subtle creak of timber punctuates the otherwise constant sounds of work. Dust settles gradually, coating floors, beams, and equipment, a record of hours spent in careful attention. The miller and assistant move in silent harmony, responding to the subtle signals of machinery and environment. Each action is both labor and meditation, part of a cycle that stretches beyond individual lifetimes. The wheel turns tirelessly, the stones hum steadily, and the river flows with patient consistency. Every minor sound, each vibration, splash or creak, is interpreted and responded to, maintaining a balance that has persisted for centuries. Life along the Somme revolves around this rhythm, the daily cycle of work guided by observation, patience, and continuous attention to the interaction between human labor and natural forces. As evening approaches, shadows deepen within the mill, yet the rhythm continues unbroken. The wheel rotates, paddles pushing against the river with quiet persistence. The stones hum, vibrating softly through the floors and beams. The miller makes careful adjustments, ensuring balance and consistency, while the assistant attends to the final grain flow. Together, their work maintains the delicate harmony that defines life within the mill, linking the present moment to centuries of tradition. And so, the afternoon wanes, flowing seamlessly into evening. The wheel turns, the stones hum, the river whispers, and the rhythm of work continues, unbroken and tireless. The mill remains a sanctuary of continuity and observation, a testament to centuries of labor, endurance, and patient attentiveness, echoing softly across the Somme Valley. Evening settles over the Somme Valley, softening the edges of the fields and river with a muted, golden light. Shadows stretch long across the mill and the surrounding banks, and the gentle flow of the river carries the day's warmth quietly downstream. The wheel turns with steady persistence, paddles slicing through the current with gentle, rhythmic splashes. The stones hum continuously, a low vibration resonating through the timber and stone, marking the passage of time in a way both subtle and enduring. Inside, the miller moves carefully among the machinery, hands tracing the grooves of the stones worn smooth by decades of use. Each rotation, each vibration tells a story, a language of pressure, friction, and flow learned over generations. Adjustments are small but deliberate. A slight nudge to a wedge, a minor realignment of the sluice gate, subtle corrections to maintain balance. Every motion is informed by centuries of accumulated knowledge, observation, and patient attention. The assistant finishes sweeping dust from the floor, aligning the final sacks of grain, and checking the smooth flow through chutes. Each movement is measured and deliberate, synchronized with the hum of the stones and the steady rotation of the wheel. Medieval milling required this constant vigilance. Even minor disruptions could affect the quality of flour or the balance of machinery. The mill is alive with quiet motion, and those who work within it must attune themselves to every vibration, sound, and subtle shift. Outside, the river continues its tireless journey. Fish occasionally break the surface, sending soft ripples across the moonlit water. Reeds sway gently in the evening breeze, whispering their soft murmur alongside the hum of the stones and the splash of the wheel's paddles. Every movement of water, every subtle change in current or flow, is observed and understood by the miller. The river is both companion and teacher, a constant presence whose energy drives the work within the mill and whose subtleties guide the human hand. The village beyond the river has quieted, and the mill stands as the central heartbeat of the valley. Children watch from a distance, absorbing lessons of patience and attentiveness without instruction, learning through observation. The wheel and stones, the hum of machinery, and the flow of the river provide an education in rhythm, endurance, and observation that no written word can convey. The miller and assistant move silently, their actions deliberate, mindful, and intertwined with the natural pulse of the valley. As the light fades, the wheel's rotation continues uninterrupted. The hum of the stones resonates more softly in the cool air, dust settling slowly on beams, floors, and machinery. The miller pauses near the window, listening carefully to the faint nuances of sound, the slight change in hum, the whisper of paddles through the water, the creak of timber under vibration. These subtleties provide information essential to the mill's function, revealing shifts in grain flow, water pressure, or stone alignment that must be addressed before the next day begins. Outside, the Somme glimmers faintly under the last light of day. Leaves drift downstream, small fish break the surface, and the reeds sway in quiet patterns. The river carries the accumulated history of the valley, its past floods, seasonal changes, and centuries of human labor along its banks. The miller, attuned to this flow, works in continuous harmony with these forces, maintaining the wheel, the stones, and the balance of nature and human effort. Inside, the miller adjusts a final wedge and checks the sluice gate, ensuring balance before night fully arrives. The stones hum in low, constant rhythm, vibrating through the floors and beams, while dust settles in quiet clouds in the moonlight streaming through cracks in the walls. The assistant checks the last sack of grain, aligning it carefully, ensuring that tomorrow's work will proceed without interruption. Each motion is deliberate, careful, and informed by centuries of knowledge and observation. The wheel turns tirelessly, paddles slicing through water with quiet persistence. The river flows with steady determination, carrying the rhythm of life past the mill and beyond the village. The hum of the stones, the soft creak of timber, and the gentle splash of paddles blend into a symphony of work, observation, and endurance, a living meditation on continuity. The mill stands as a testament to human labor, attentiveness, and harmony with the natural world, its quiet presence anchoring the valley in rhythm and patience. As evening deepens into night, the miller and assistant continue their work, maintaining balance and flow, adjusting subtle motions, and observing every nuance of stone, grain, and water. The Somme remains tireless, flowing endlessly, shaping the wheel and stones with patient consistency. Life in the mill is a careful dance with natural forces, an unbroken cycle of observation, correction, and endurance that has persisted for centuries. The mill's rhythm continues uninterrupted as the last light fades, the wheel turning, stones humming, and river flowing. Dust drifts lazily in beams of moonlight, settling slowly across surfaces that have borne centuries of labor. The miller and assistant move in quiet harmony, their work a reflection of experience, observation, and patience. The valley, river, and mill exist in a delicate equilibrium, a living testament to the tireless rhythm of life along the Somme. And so, as night fully settles, the valley grows quiet, the mill stands resilient, and the Somme whispers softly through the darkness, carrying with it the quiet pulse of work, water, and enduring human effort, preparing for the final night and the last moments of continuity before the story concludes. Night has fully settled over the Somme Valley. The river glimmers under the pale silver of the moon, flowing tirelessly as it has for centuries. The wheel turns steadily, paddles dipping and rising with quiet determination, producing a soft splash that harmonizes with the low hum of the stones. Inside, dust drifts lazily through the moonbeams, settling on worn planks and machinery, a gentle reminder of hours of labor and centuries of history embedded in every surface. The miller walks slowly through the interior, hands resting lightly on the beams, feeling the vibrations of the stones and listening closely to their steady hum. Adjustments are subtle, slight nudges to wedges, a careful realignment of sluices, but precise, ensuring that the balance of grain, stone, and water continues uninterrupted. Every action is measured, deliberate, a continuation of the rhythm established over generations. Outside, the Somme moves quietly, carrying small leaves and twigs downstream, reflecting faint starlight in shifting patterns. Reeds along the banks sway gently, whispering with the soft evening breeze. The river, timeless and patient, mirrors the tireless work of the mill and those who tend it, its subtle movements a reminder that continuity is maintained not by force, but by steady, careful attention. The assistant finishes the last inspection, smoothing the grain in the hoppers and ensuring that all surfaces are clean and aligned. Every creak of timber, every subtle vibration from the stones, every splash of water is observed, noted, and responded to with the precision learned over years of dedicated work. Medieval milling required this constant mindfulness. Even small deviations could ripple through the system, affecting both efficiency and the quality of flour. As the night deepens further, a strange, almost imperceptible sound arises from the river. Subtle at first, like a soft ripple against the paddles, but distinct from the usual hum. The miller pauses, eyes narrowing, listening carefully. The wheel's rotation continues, the stones hum steadily, yet a faint unease creeps into the rhythm. He steps closer to the window, peering into the river's silvery depths, and notices the water's surface shifting unusually, ripples forming without apparent cause. The assistant, sensing the miller's pause, watches silently. The air feels charged, though no wind stirs, no sound of animals nearby interrupts the night. For a moment, time itself seems suspended, as though the river, wheel, and stones are holding their breath. Every heartbeat is loud in the quiet of the mill. The low creak of timber, the soft splash of water, and the hum of stones dominate, yet beneath them lies a subtle, unsettling vibration, an echo of something unspoken. The miller moves slowly toward the wheel, adjusting the sluice slightly to compensate for a minor fluctuation in current, yet the river continues its irregular motion. The shadows along the banks stretch and twist in the moonlight, indistinct but unervingly dynamic. Each ripple, each reflection, seems to suggest a story beyond immediate understanding. Yet the miller, grounded in experience and intuition, continues methodically, attending to every small detail with steady hands and patient observation. Hours pass in this quiet tension, the night stretching endlessly over the Somme Valley. The wheel turns, paddles slicing the water with rhythmic persistence, stones hum in low vibration, and the river whispers its timeless song. Yet the faint, mysterious ripples persist, hinting at something unseen beneath the moonlit surface. Even the assistant, practiced and calm, cannot deny the subtle change in rhythm, a silent, almost imperceptible signal that this night is unlike any other. Then, without warning, a soft splash from upstream breaks the stillness. Leaves and twigs drift with unusual patterns, and the miller's eyes catch a fleeting shimmer in the river, something moving swiftly beneath the surface. He steps back, silent and careful, watching as the currents shift in ways that seem deliberate, almost intelligent. The wheel continues its rotation, the stones hum, yet the pulse of the river quickens, blending with a low, steady rhythm into a new cadence. The assistant watches, frozen in quiet awe. For centuries, neither has seen this before. The river, wheel, and stones maintain their rhythm, yet beneath it flows something unknown. The valley is hushed, as though nature itself waits for what is about to unfold. Shadows ripple, moonlight shimmers, and the quiet symphony of the mill continues, layered now with a tension that is impossible to ignore. And here the story pauses, on the edge of discovery, suspended in time. Something moves beneath the Somme, unseen yet unmistakable. The wheel turns, the stones hum, and the river whispers, as centuries of human labor continue alongside forces unknown, waiting to reveal their secret. Close your eyes for a moment. Take a deep, slow breath. Feel the gentle rhythm of the mill, the tireless turning of the wheel, the steady hum of the stones beneath your feet. Listen to the soft splash of water against the paddles, and the whisper of the river as it moves endlessly, carrying centuries of history. Let your mind settle into the quiet pulse of the Somme Valley. Imagine the dust drifting slowly in the beams of moonlight, the worn wooden beams beneath your hands, and the faint, enduring aroma of flower and river. Feel the patient rhythm of centuries of labor, the continuity of human attention and natural forces intertwined. Let each exhale release tension, and each inhale fill your mind with the calm steadiness of the wheel, the stones, and the flowing water. The night is vast, and the river's secret waits silently beneath the surface. But for now, in this moment, you are part of the rhythm. You are beside the mill, feeling the steady pulse of work, life, and continuity. The wheel turns, the stones hum, and the Somme flows on, endlessly patient, endlessly enduring, holding the mysteries of the night beneath its shimmering surface.